Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Kakashi regrets not training Naruto. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AlysiaStorms and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, I do not own Naruto. My mood has been dark as of late and every time I write something dark or angst, you guys love it. So let's see what I do now with this yes. Prologue. From deep and high up in the heavens, an older blonde man stood next to a death god. Watching the events going down below on the world, needing to see his son treated like the hero he is. But finding anything but. He finds the villagers treating his Naruto with hatred and fear, to the point the poor boy knows nothing else from them. But he is proud as his son remains strong. Loving his home and vowing to protect it. Minato Namikaze couldn't be prouder. That is until he saw what Kakashi, his once best student, was inadvertently doing to the little boy who so desperately looked up to him as a father. And it hurt him to say he was ashamed of how far Kakashi has sunken. Is he working with Sasuke today Naruto? Phantom running late maybe another time. On a mission Naruto, sorry I can't help you. One after another, the excuses kept coming to Naruto. One after another, his son's fragile spirit was in danger from a shield of happiness that was beginning to crumble under all that weight of rejection from someone Naruto looked up to. But the last straw last one after everything Naruto did to get there was when he all but begged his sensei to teach him. Only to get this in response, sorry I can't Naruto. Have to train Sasuke, have found a better teacher for you though. The crushed expression in the blue eyes of his son tore Minato apart. Looking up at the death god, the great being shook his head no, as he knew what the former Hokage of Konoha so dearly wanted. You cannot go and train Naruto, young one. The death god said sadly, and he understands one of his many charges feelings all too well. But do not worry, there is one coming who will. He will train your son the way he once trained you. Confused for a moment, the god waves his hand and shows a very familiar image of a long white-haired man approaching the gates of Konoha. Chuckling in amusement, Minato can't help but turn it into full-blown laughter alongside the god as Naruto whom in a need for a teacher whom he can respect. Who can acknowledge him for whom he was and what he could do. Well, he finds a very well-known and perverted ninja named Jiraiya. Hey pervy sage. Will you train me? That's my son. The former Hokage chortled as he fell back laughing. The wings on his backside spread out and almost alive. They too seemed to be shaking with their own laughter. Still he finds his eyes drifting to the gray-haired ninja with something akin to disappointment. You know I never would have done that, the blonde said quietly. I know, but do not worry. Your former student will eventually realize his mistake and it will come at a high price. Not liking the way this is sounding, Minato says nothing but turns back to watch the events. The ones to come will be enough to force the yondaime to try and break the one rule he is given. To avoid any and all contact with loved ones left behind. -888888888888888888. Chapter 1, a week after the death of the third. Admittedly, Kakashi was stunned at the fact that according to Sasuke, Naruto was far stronger and more in control than what he had originally thought. It wasn't the Uchiha as everyone had thought who stopped Gaara of the Sand. It was Naruto, and he had done it by summoning Gamabunta, the chief toad. One of if not the strongest summons out in the elemental countries. The only way Naruto could have learned that was from Jiraiya. But the toad sage had not been seen in Konoha for years. He had gone chasing after Orochimaru to bring him back to Konoha. Pondering his thoughts as he looks to question the blonde, Kakashi stops as he overhears other ninjas talking rapidly in excitement. One of the voices is familiar enough that the copycat ninja recognizes Abisu. Is it true, Abisu? Did the toad Sannin take a new student? A ninja had asked with excitement. Just the imaginings of one of the legends coming out of retirement to take a student was enough to thrill any and all ninjas into hoping that they too could be chosen. Yes. He took Naruto Uzumaki as his pupil. Ibisu replied with a kind smile. Or should I say Naruto kind of bribed him into taking him on as one. What, he took the demon? About ready to protest that the blonde youth was no demon. Kakashi is surprised as Ibisu speaks up. Uzumaki is not a demon. He says quietly as he speaks. Telling the others about the positive changes the blonde has made on Konohamaru and his friends, inspiring the little ones to work harder and to help to the best of their ability. The gray-haired ninja begins to become even more puzzled, although proud of his student. You mean, the Daimon Uzumaki kid is responsible for the changes in my brother? The female voice said in surprise as she was always one to listen. Yuden, the grandson's teammate, was her baby brother and he had changed to a little boy who was almost ashamed of his shyness to one who was starting to speak up with ideas. If that's true, why does everyone think Sasuke and the others are responsible? I think because they want him to be. Ibisu replied sadly. The people of the village you and I both know refuse to see Naruto for the boy that he is. It took actually watching him and the way he was with the honorable grandson for me to see. Maybe they need to see Naruto before they can know him. Thoughtful, Kakashi hears them walking away, but not before the male had a thoughtful question. Where's Naruto now? Why do you ask? Ibisu replied. Just curious if what you say is true. I got some stuff I can show the kid. Well, the council just sent Jiraiya off to go and get Tsunade to become the 5th Hokage. And since Jiraiya is the only person who could technically find her, he said he would as long as he was able to take Naruto with him and under his teachings. I bet the council wasn't too pleased with that. The guy chuckled. They probably wanted him to take the Uchiha God bloodline or not. I have never seen a more stuck-up emotionless kid. Take pity on him, he did go through a lot, you know. Although I admit that's probably true, they probably wanted Jiraiya to take him on as his student. But since Kakashi is the only one with the Sharingan, he is better off with the kid. Ibisu replied. Also, to defend the Uchiha isn't all that emotionless. What do you mean? Naruto gets a rise out of him and vice versa. Ibisu chuckled. Did you ever ask Iruka about the time that Naruto and Sasuke? As Ibisu walks off, Kakashi just remains where he sits. Now he knows why he couldn't find Naruto, but he can't help but wonder. Why did Master Jiraiya take the dead last as his student? Elsewhere, Jiraiya watched a blonde youth with fondness. So much like his father Minato, Naruto was eager to learn all that he could. Quizzing the Toad Sage often about jutsus as they traveled, he had immediately set Naruto to learning one of his father's key techniques, the Rasengan. The youth took to it like a fish to water. Already under his watchful eyes, Naruto is struggling to break a thick rubber ball. Thinking back to the Yondaime, as memories hit him, Jiraiya's thoughts drift to the copy ninja with anger. He would have been disappointed in you, Kakashi, for the way you have ignored his son. Chapter 2. Outside Konoha, Kakashi worked with the young Uchiha to the best of his ability. Already having helped him learn the Sharingan among other things, the copy ninja found that his work with the youth was growing in leaps and bounds. But something else wasn't. Something that only a blonde that had he trained him alongside the Uchiha might have noticed had he been there. It was something that Kakashi would end up kicking himself over and over years to come. Sasuke's desire for vengeance. Some people, including the ones watching from the heavens, would have pointed out to Kakashi that Naruto's mere presence calmed the Uchiha down to the point that he had still thought about his vengeance. But not as strongly as he would have had he not been placed with said youth. In a way, as Sakura would point out years later, Sasuke was seeing Naruto as his family and no one else. But the blonde for the moment remained forgotten by the copy ninja. His delight in such an apt pupil that he remains unaware as things are further set in motion. The fight that destroys his 3 students' spirits, forcing them to grow far beyond their years, is coming, and this time it won't be stopped. A week or so later, Naruto was getting out of the hospital in Konoha after being dragged there by the new Hokage, who unofficially adopts him as a member of her family. The fact that word has already begun to spread via a very drunk Jiraiya that Naruto was the one responsible for persuading her, villagers were not as prone to get angry at him or to hurt him. It was something that made the blonde smile happily in joy. Humming a little tune as he waits for the nurse to let him go via Shizune's orders, Naruto finds himself looking at the door to find Sasuke staring at him. Hey Sasuke. Oh. Making a face of irritation, Naruto glares at his friend, unaware that this is the moment that determines the fate of Team 7. Having not been able to hang with Sasuke to train alongside his best friend because of Kakashi's neglect, he agrees to spar with his friend on top of the roof. He never knew that this meant more to the Uchiha boy than a simple friendly fight between friends. Sakura, suspicious and for the first time realizing that something was dreadfully wrong, as they casually discuss the spar, runs for help. Runs to find their sensei that will soon also make a mistake all his own. Finding him, she doesn't have to say a word, as Kakashi shoots up as 2 very familiar chakra signatures explode in size. Vanishing in a puff of smoke in mere seconds, Kakashi goes to the hospital to stop it alongside Sakura. Running up to the rooftop, Sakura is screaming as Kakashi becomes a silvery blur. Stop it. 2 wrists are caught. One holding a Chidori, the other a Rasengan. Both aimed at one another, neither boy understanding the effects it could have on one another, are thrown far and apart. Sasuke landing close to a billboard and Naruto, a water tower. When they are coming around, 2 huge mistakes are made. One of which is Naruto is scolded for knowing the Rasengan. Kakashi, not thinking of the fact he had taught Sasuke the Chidori, he reams into the blonde boy who had worshipped him for using it at all. Intent on finding Jiraiya, he does not notice Sakura, who feels that today will become the day of infamy, or that Naruto was losing all respect he ever had for him. That Naruto, who had so desperately wanted his approval, was effectively being killed by his words of disappointment. Especially as Sasuke was getting nothing but praise. Kakashi did not see Sasuke turn around and view the damage that Naruto had done to the water tower. Did not see the dark eyes widen and punch into the wall behind him. Sasuke had seen what Kakashi did not want to see. Naruto had grown strong. Immensely strong and most definitely in control. That very night, Sasuke Uchiha left Konoha to go to Orochimaru. That night he also decided that should Naruto go after him, he will try and do what Itachi would have wanted him to do. Kill his closest friend. Chapter 3. Konoha. The following day, Minato was panicked, his spirit having fled the great god side as he realized what was happening. He followed his son and friends as they chased after their missing comrade. Only just this morning had Naruto and the others realized that Sasuke was gone. And the only ones available to go after one lone genin would be of course other genins. But that was before they had gotten reports that Sound Ninja were there to meet up with the Uchiha. And not just any Sound Ninja but the Sound 4. The elite of the Sound for all intents and purposes. Thankfully he had managed before he fled to gently urge Tsunade to ask the Sand siblings who were just arriving to go and aid Naruto and the others. If they had not gone when they did, Taoji would be more than likely dead as well as Neji. Shikamaru and Kiba would not have made it past their opponents without aid from Kankuro and Temari, as Naruto would not have been free to go after Sasuke without aid from Gaara and the errant Lee. Both of which took on Kamimura, allowing Naruto to go after the errant youth. While this was going though, and Naruto was catching up to his best friend, his brother practically in his opinion. Kakashi was returning. Immediately upon hearing of what had happened, something akin to guilt began to wash over him. He left anyway. I failed. Ran rampant through his thoughts, without even being told or stopped. Kakashi had already turned around and went after the boys. Summoning his nin dogs as he was leaving. The hounds took off, already to sniff out the trails of the boys and to pray that he is not too late to stop Naruto and Sasuke from making the biggest mistake of their lives. One by one he comes across medic nin teams aiding in the search for the boys. Choji, then Neji are carried away. Kiba is lifted away moments later alongside Kankuro. Kiba and Akamaru, although worse for wear at the moment, seem to be smiling as he talks with the Sand Ninja. Fighting sometimes does after all help to cement bonds between allies. Shikamaru, on the other hand, is walking fine except for cradling his hand. Temari beside him looking exhausted. It was the two of them out of those whom he had seen who looked the least damaged. Continuing on he runs into Lee and Gaara, both boys in similar conditions to Shikamaru and Temari, but both looking far worse than the others. Although still walking and talking to each other, the two had faced the toughest of the Sound Ninja. In fact, they were intent on coming with them to stop and to retrieve Sasuke if at all possible. Understanding this, Kakashi had already taken off as Pakken had picked up Naruto's scent with ease. Leaving one dog for the two to catch up with. As soon as they are able, he runs and leaps into the trees. Moving faster and faster, he almost falls out as that immense feeling of chakra. They same before as on top of the hospital erupts. No. Rushing forward now, Kakashi sees nothing but bright white light. And he knows that this is the chakra from two of the most powerful ninjutsu attacks. One he had created and the other his former sensei had done years ago. Arriving at what is known as the Valley of the End, Kakashi looked around in the falling rain. Pakken, can you smell them? Sniffing the ground, the dog is off like a shot heading towards one of the statues. Looking down and off the cliffside, Kakashi sees a motionless orange form on a small platform beneath the image of one of the first Hokages of Konoha. Leaping down, praying above all else that he is not seeing things, Kakashi is almost ready to cry as he finds his student struggling to stay alive. Although his skin have fully healed, Kakashi is no fool as he sees the hole through Naruto's jumpsuit, one perfectly fitted the size of a chidori belonging to Sasuke. What have I done? Kakashi whispered to himself. Pakken wisely says nothing as he sniffs the headband beside him. It's Sasuke's, the hound said with a quiet sadness as Kakashi bends down. You gave it your all, didn't you, Naruto? The copy ninja said sadly as he placed the Sasuke's head wrap on Naruto's stomach. Picking up the youth, he manages to get Naruto onto his back. Leaping up carefully, adjust chakra when he needs to, Kakashi reaches the top with relative ease. Still, as he looks at the devastation below, Kakashi could almost sense the pain and guiltiness radiating from not just Naruto but Sasuke. A whimpering sound from his precious cargo is emitted and his eyes open slowly and almost glassy with pain. Elsewhere, someone whose eyes are identical stops before he continues on his path. A look of relief on his features mixed in with the pain and sorrow of loss. Some bonds are not meant to be broken. Resisting the urge to go after the errant youth, as the pained cry of the one on his back erupts, Kakashi leaps away. A soft questioning sound of a single name asking for the whereabouts of his best friend, Sasuke. Naruto whimpered in agony as his normally bright blue eyes had become darker. His tanned skin, normally brown, was a sickly yellow. Shaking his head silently, Kakashi pauses long enough to move his hands from behind and send the youth into a deep resting sleep. By that time, the medics had caught up and even then their eyes widen in sadness at the state of the fox child. He is healing slowly, come, we must get him back to Konoha. Nodding their head, the medics who normally would refuse to treat him had seen the sadness before Kakashi had sent him to sleep in the boy's eyes. No one who could be suffering that much could be a demon. Moving forward and ahead now, Kakashi races back to the village. His thoughts upon the two boys, who were his students. A couple of days later, Kakashi found himself distantly looking at the window where a blonde youth slept wrapped in several bandages to help his body heal. wanting to say he is guarding him from any villagers that might think now was a good time to hurt him. In a way Kakashi knew better. He was feeling guilty. Unlike Sakura, who had decided to do something about the pain she felt for not being able to help by approaching Tsunade, Kakashi fled. After all, he failed Sasuke, did he not? He failed his student, the one who was among the last of Obito's family. Sorrow in his gaze, Kakashi leaps away, promising himself that later on when Naruto was out of the hospital, he would offer to train the blonde. It wouldn't be until much later when he goes looking for his student, which Kakashi realizes he is now alone for the next 3 or so years. Sakura is gone to Tsunade, Sasuke having fled to Orochimaru, and the one person, the one whom he thought about but always told himself whom he would help later, the one whose loss he was beginning to feel deep in his heart was gone with the last of the Sannin. Jiraiya the Toad Sage had taken Naruto as his student to teach him and to help train him to go against the Akatsuki. And to possibly get his friend back. For now, if there was anyone who truly understood what Naruto was going through, it was Jiraiya. Because the one person who could have stopped it before it happened never noticed the influence he had on both until too late. Over the next 3 years, Kakashi would learn what he could have done and regret every single thing. Naruto Sasuke Sakura, I'm sorry. Chapter 4. 3 years can be a long time to wait. And a long time to forget. Kakashi should know that most of all. But yet things still do not click with him as he goes off for one mission or another. The pain in his heart increasing a little bit more at the mentions of Sasuke from the villagers who want their precious Uchiha back. Still, as much as his heart aches with failure over the dark-haired boy, his no longer remembers what he had promised himself concerning his other students. Sakura no longer turns to him to see his companionship as she has found her own in Tsunade and Shizune. Sasuke from all reports is learning from Orochimaru and is becoming colder and more emotionless. Unlike the youth who was opening up thanks to the efforts of a singular blonde individual. The one he tried to kill. Admittedly, he feels regret over that, yet he does not think of Naruto as often. To be honest, he tries not to and has not, because since he had left he had felt pain in his heart at the thought of the blonde being taught by someone else. It literally made him in the beginning fight his own urge to take his student back. Never realizing that if he had gone after the young boy, who despite loving the attention was missing the first people to actually accept him with all his heart. Especially the teacher he longed to seek approval from. But as time passes, people quit thinking when there is no word. People quit remembering when there is nothing really to remember. It's horrible to do that to oneself. But it is done. That is why he kept taking mission after mission to keep the pain away. Without pain though one can forget things Kakashi promised himself he would not, but he did forget his promise to himself. That is why he did not rush immediately as a little boy and his 2 friends came running pell-mell through the streets that day, looking for the members of the Rookie 9 that were in town. He's back. The voices of 11-year-olds Mogi, Yuden and Konohamaru screamed as they went from clan to clan looking for the 15-year-olds, which were Naruto's closest friends. Sakura, already having been with them when they first found out, was happily chatting with the youth and Jiraiya. And as they approached the Hokage Tower, Naruto was greeted by a crowd of ninjas. "Hey dope!" Kiba shouted as he and Akamaru bounded over. The latter, literally knocking the blonde to the ground, starts licking Naruto's face with glee at seeing an old friend. As the dog is forcefully to a degree giving their old friend his affections, the group of friends takes in Naruto's new changes. Taller now, standing around 5'10", his hair was definitely in the same spiky style as before. But longer in the spikes that now drooped messily around the Konoha leaf symbol. His bright blue eyes wide and happy to see them as Kiba finally gets his partner off, the girls taking the fact that he has taken on a more aristocratic look. His body was lean and muscular and encased still in the usual bright orange. But now it was also in a more or less predominantly black jumpsuit, but for the bright colored stripe across the top and down the sides. "Damn Naruto. You look good," Ino said with a grin as she pounced on him. The blonde allows herself to be swung as does Sakura as both girls are hugged beyond belief. Hinata, hanging back a little bit, can't help but feel jealous. Still, she sees gently pushed forward by Tenten, who smiles with delight as Naruto picks her up to swing her a bit. Buns. Smacking him upside the head for calling her that, Niji, Chaoji, and Lee try not to crack up while Hinata approaches Naruto shyly. "Hello, Naruto-kun," the dark-haired Hyuga girl said warmly. Only to find herself being hugged as well, pressed so close against his body. The others can't help but giggle as once again Hinata faints in blissful happiness. As this is happening, Kakashi finds himself watching from up high. His surprise at seeing how much his student has changed, a small twinge of guilt erupts from within. Regretfully, he had hoped that Naruto was the same loudmouth brash youth he had been years ago. Although he still shows some signs of that personality, Kakashi can tell Naruto has changed and is far more in control of his strength. Watching as they continue on, the copy ninja is startled as a much older and powerful ninja appears beside him. "You know, despite what I think of you, I am turning him over to your protection and also training." Tsunade already knows and has agreed. "You are the best now available to help Naruto be prepared for them." Jiraiya stated quietly. Shame at the fact he can sense the repulsion in Jiraiya's voice, the coolie derides him of the proud feeling he had gotten at the sight of the blonde. I understand. Finish teaching him his father's techniques. The Sannin ordered. I left those two out for you Kakashi to show him. After all you helped his father develop those skills. Confused and puzzled, Jiraiya chuckles and vanishes, but not before saying one simple thing. Remove the whiskers from his cheeks Kakashi and tell me who do you see. I leave it to you to tell him, once you realize it. Puzzled by Jiraiya's words, Kakashi finds his eyes drifting to Naruto. In his mind he does as Jiraiya requests. But instead of Naruto, he finds himself looking at the yondaime, his former teacher. Looking at the mountain rapidly and then back at the blonde several times, Kakashi's pain grows as he realizes what he should have noticed years ago. Not only did he fail Obito in protecting his baby cousin Sasuke long after his death, he failed to be a part of the life belonging to his beloved sensei's son, Naruto Uzumaki. Resolve deep within him, Kakashi vows to do his best to be there for the blonde. To train him in his father's techniques even further so that he can reach the Rasen Shuriken and the Hiraishin. Maybe by then he could win back Naruto's friendship at least as his former student's gaze meets his. And looks away. Chapter 5 Kakashi quietly watched from the rooftops later that night as Naruto hung out with Sakura and his friends. Although the two had invited him to join them after the test Tsunade had asked him to do with them, Kakashi had declined. Holding up the book Naruto had gotten him from his favorite author, Jiraiya, the older man had disappeared in his usual puff of smoke. Only to reappear above them and watch with a quiet longing. Looking back at that time this afternoon, Kakashi was not expecting anything save a hello. But the fact that the only person who got a present from Naruto out of all the people the youth knew was him. The ninja almost wanted to refuse it. He didn't deserve Naruto's thoughtfulness. He honestly truly believed he didn't. But looking into those quiet blue eyes that half expect him to reject it, he was happy to see surprise in them as he took the book gratefully. He was even more overjoyed when Naruto had given him a shy smile that unlike others was quiet and true. For the first time Kakashi had looked forward to testing his two former students and they both passed with flying colors. Although both will call him Kakashi-sensei out of habit, they were his teammates now and no longer his pupils. Watching the blonde chat happily with Sakura and teammate Shino having recently returned from a mission, the five teenagers were talking about maybe catching a movie. All of them wanting to hang out and relax with a friend, it is not much longer that Team 10 joins the duo and soon all of them are off to the movie theater. When would you tell him about Minato? Turning around to find Jiraiya looking at him with a mixture of disgust and curiosity, Kakashi looks away and does not answer. I don't know exactly the gray-haired copy ninja replied. Not now not when he is like this though. Not when he is happy. Jiraiya said quietly. I can see your point there, but the older he gets Kakashi, the more he will start looking like his father. All it takes is for one of Minato's old enemies to see him to know that they are related. With Akatsuki coming for him, he will be sent out on missions a lot. The more he moves, the safer he is. Kakashi winced out. The thoughts of what the Rocknin alone would do to the blonde should they see him was indeed quite painful to his heart. So you will tell him soon then right? Yes. Giving one last sigh, Jiraiya fishes a stack of papers out of his bag. Small and numerous in number, Kakashi takes them with a puzzled expression. I have taught Naruto how to access and control the Kyuubi's chakra. He can safely work up top 3 tails and control it without getting too worn out. Anything past that, I use these to drain him. Yes. Jiraiya stated quietly. Although it is a temporary solution it is the best one we have at the moment. Use them sparingly. Understood the ninja replied as he takes the small stack of papers and places them in a pouch to the side. And Kakashi, don't wait too long, I knew Naruto's father as a child. But you knew him as a man. The old man said softly. Don't wait too long. That said, a toad appears and Jiraiya hops upon his back. Vanishing moments later as the toad leaps into the night sky. Now left to reflect on his memories, Kakashi finds himself buying a ticket for the movie that Naruto and his friends had gone to see, without realizing it. Intending to watch the film to remember those times he had done so with Rin, Obito, and Minato-sensei. He instead finds his eyes drifting to laughing figures in the middle of the theater. Naruto was avidly watching the movie starring Princess Yuki from Snow Country. A favorite actress and former client, Kakashi found himself smiling as the memory of the then blonde 12-year-old, encouraging her to fight for her people hit him. Watching the movie, his thoughts about it make him realize that the youth had always been subtle and yet strong about encouraging his friends and his family to grow. He had never let them give up on who they were, he simply set them on a different path that they could do, that they could love. Thoughtful about those whom Naruto has influenced in their shared past, not once did Kakashi realize what the blonde youth was doing to him. Not once did he realize that with his mere presence, Kakashi had found himself turning to a new path himself. Alone or out of choice, out of regret for the loss of those most important. Naruto, with aid from a spirit from long ago, was giving the older man a chance to never be alone again. Chapter 6. Kakashi was admittedly worried as he watched Naruto sleep fitfully in the woods. 2 weeks after his return and placement with Kakashi and Sakura, Naruto and the two of them had gone to Tsunade to see about missions higher than C or D rank. Little was Naruto and the others to know that this would be far higher than that. One whom almost destroyed Konoha if not for the blonde was in danger now. Gaara of the Sand and Kazukiage of Suna, as well as fellow Jinchuriki, had been kidnapped by Akatsuki. Naruto's strongest enemies were now officially on the move. He was quite hesitant to take the mission, especially after what Jiraiya had told him alongside Tsunade before they were testing him. If Akatsuki was going to come after Naruto, wouldn't it have been better to send him anywhere but where they were? But the blonde youth would have none of that, and his own words came back to him via bright blue eyes. Those who leave their friends behind are worse than trash. He took the mission and he as well as Sakura left with the blonde youth that very day. While they had been traveling, Sakura had asked some very pertinent questions of Naruto, ones that the young man did not want to answer, except for this statement. "Gaara is like me." Puzzled by this, Sakura said nothing else, but Kakashi's heart and soul nearly broke with those 4 painful words. It explained so much about that time 3 years ago and the events that happened in the woods. The one where he had started to lose his 3 precious students. Sakura was held prisoner and Sasuke had nearly died fighting the demon vessel from the sand. Many to this day still thought it was Sasuke, despite facts proving it was the blonde who had saved them from Shikaku's wrath. It brings forth Abisu's words from so long ago. They choose not to see what is in front of them. Never have truer words been spoken on behalf of this bright young man. Slowly and with time, ninjas of the leaf had apparently been taking another look at the blonde since his return. Why? It seems the young man whom Abisu had talked to years ago alongside a woman was Kotetsu of the guards. And being the curious ninja that he was, he decided to talk to Naruto's classmates. They all confirmed from their own experiences that Naruto was not a demon and that they themselves had to teach him the basics in just about everything the boy knows when it comes to simple reading and writing. Shikamaru and Shino were the ones who did most of the tutoring with aid from the other boys in the class who were happy to lend Naruto their books to use. Kiba was the one who played and challenged him in hands-on practice, besides the well-known Uchiha boy. And Choji. Well, Naruto and Choji shared a common love of something strong between them. Something that the boy was willing to share often since his mother made so much and he noticed the blonde little. He gave Naruto food for while he was in school. But ironically, neither boy knew that Choji's mother had seen the longing as well from Naruto. Despite what her husband believed at that time, Mrs. Akamichi was a good woman who could plainly see the child within Naruto screaming for a little bit of love and friendship. She knew her son well and deliberately made too much for him to eat by himself, allowing him to share with a boy who barely had any good food. In the end, when they realized what she had contributed later, Naruto had all but cried as he asked to hug her. The woman accepted it with a warm and gentle smile. "You're a good boy, Naruto. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Word spread thanks to Kotetsu and slowly ninjas were giving Naruto another look and the stories concerning events around Team 7 a closer inspection. Most of them were realizing the differences and got up the courage to go after the truth themselves. What they found out, and especially after realizing the reports of Gaara and how he was treated, made them realize that if it wasn't for the kindness of these children and the few who were willing to look underneath the prankster exterior, Naruto could have easily ended up like Gaara. The fact that he didn't has earned him many a second look from his fellow shinobi and villagers. Things were changing for the blonde youth. Gaara. Startled by the sudden yell and awakening of the youth, Kakashi found himself looking at the blonde who has fear and worry in his bright blue eyes. His fists clenched to the point the knuckles were white. Kakashi found himself trying to cheer up the blonde who was frightened for his missing friend. "You'll be alright, Naruto." Blue eyes flash with hope at his words as Naruto looks up at his sensei from years ago. "You think so?" "Yeah, I do." The older man responded with a kind smile behind his mask. Giving a small and grateful look to the copy ninja, Naruto lies back down, but not before asking one thing that startles the older man. "Dodo, you think?" "Think what?" "That I will ever become Hokage?" Kakashi was not only startled by this question. He was stunned at the nervous, almost painful cry in Naruto's voice that just about broke his heart. "It's your dream, isn't it, Naruto?" The ninja replied with a concerned look. "Wee, do you doubt it now?" "I don't know," Naruto whispered quietly. His only response as he drifts back to sleep. Kakashi can't help but remember the expression as his eyes closed. One of despair. "What has happened to you, Naruto? Why? Why are you so sad?" Not realizing that Naruto has heard, Kakashi never knows that his question is answered. "Because I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm going to fail everyone." Chapter 7. Even though she had died to do what she did, Kakashi was grateful to Chiyo for restoring Gaara for so many reasons. Several inconsequential, as it only had to refer to dealings with Konoha as an ally. The main and primary reason was his blonde pupil. If Gaara had truly died, even though he and his former students mourned the elder woman's death, It might have broken the blonde in more ways than one. He finally realized that Naruto values the Kazekage as more than just someone who understands him. He needs the Red Heat as a friend. Although definitely different from his missing student the Uchiha, Kakashi found himself observing similar mannerisms that the dark-haired youth had displayed in his time in Konoha. But unlike Sasuke, Gaara, much to the delight of the villagers and his siblings, had opened himself up to the people. He was still of course a killer and would do it without a doubt. But Gaara was tempered now, more sedate and thoughtful of his actions. He had become a leader worthy of his villagers' respect. But to Naruto, he became a true best friend. For unlike with Sasuke where they bonded so close, one would swear they were indeed siblings. The closeness in emotions between the two young men could only be described as deep friendship. Gaara's death would have crushed Naruto's spirit. Chiyo's saving him at the cost of her own life had made it soar with hope despite the sadness at her own death. Kakashi-sensei. Looking up to find his only former female student looking at him, Kakashi raises an eyebrow in response to her tentative query. What is it, Sakura? Naruto's a demon vessel, isn't he? Eyes widening, the older man hops from his position and gestures for her to follow him into a separate room. Glad that Naruto is busy chatting with the Sabuku siblings, he looks at one of the few people whom the blonde treasures. What makes you ask that? When we had left to the hideout, Chiyo was saying some things and well after what had happened to the Kazekage and all. I got to thinking. Is that why those men wanted Naruto after what they did to Gaara? I mean, they had insinuated that the other was there when we broke through. You always were one of my brightest, Sakura. Kakashi said sadly. You do realize that what I am about to tell you is classified as a SS secret in Konoha. Nodding her head, Sakura listens as Kakashi details the true and actual events of that night 15 years ago. As the words come forth, neither one realizes that a blonde was listening and trembling outside the door. About ready to make a break for it, a gentle smile from Temari, as well as hands upon his shoulder from Gaara and Kankuro stop him. Listen and then react, Naruto-kun. Temari said with a warm smile. Poor Naruto, Sakura whispered sadly. That explains so much of everything. You do not think he is the demon? Kakashi asked with a smile that shouted approval. Of course not. The pink-haired girl responded with glare of, do you think I'm an idiot? I mean, with all that happened, if Naruto was truly a demon, seal or not, I don't think that would have stopped the Kyuubi from lashing out at everyone. Inside the seal, a fox demon looks up and growls, simply a statement that causes the blonde to hold back a chuckle in relief. Thank you. There is a human who is not stupid. I think Naruto would be very proud to call you his friend. Kakashi chuckled. Well, the idiot better. Sakura giggled. I ain't going to lose him either. After all, he still intends to bring Sasuke back, and this time I'm going to be there to help him. Smiling genuinely, it was that time that Naruto chose to enter the room followed by the Sabakus. The cue given, Kakashi and Sakura both stand up and gather their things as others that had come to aid them had long since already gone. In their need to save Gaara, Team Guy had been sent to aid them. It was lucky that they did. The Akatsuki had set traps and they had to face 4 of the ninjas in head-on combat. Guy's team was lucky to only have to face Kisame of the Mist. Kakashi and his team, the other 3. Sasori of the Red Sands, whom Sakura and Chiyo had successfully killed. As well as Deidara, whom they are hoping thanks to Kakashi's new Manjikyu eye, was dead as well. But doubt had crept into their minds and well. He may be gone, but the consensus was that the blonde clay ninja from Rock was not out, and last they had to face the one who got away. Itachi. If Sasuke had known what Kakashi and the council knew now, he may have never left Konoha. After all, his brother would be coming for the 9-tailed fox Jinchuriki. Also known as Naruto Uzumaki, his one and only real friend in the dark-haired youth's opinion. But something tells Kakashi that it will not be long before the rumors spread and knowledge is fully known of what the Akatsuki wants. And he worries about the blonde for a reason that ties into his relationship with the Uchiha. Sooner or later Sasuke will come back to Konoha for Naruto. The reasons are what frightens him. The one reason he hopes is because of the bonds of brotherhood that had manifested between the two boys growing up. The reason he does not want is for Sasuke to return to use Naruto as bait for his brother. That would destroy him. Chapter 8. Kakashi winced as he left the blonde alone with Yamato. The looks on the youth's face hurt him as he knows Naruto must be thinking that once again he was abandoning him. But since they have returned to Konoha, that feeling of danger has never left him. He had hoped by teaching the youth a continuation of his father's skill, he could work up the courage to tell him about his father and who he was. He had hoped it would by all accounts aid him in getting rid of this feeling and bond him closer to the blonde who was showing signs of trust and adoration in him. Feelings that he never really noticed until now. Ones that made him feel warm, almost paternal towards the youth. But it only made things worse. And that is when the news reached him as well as others in the shinobi ranks. Asuma Soritobi was dead. According to the team that had left to give and deliver aid to Suna, they had run into 2 of the Akatsuki members and unlike Team Kakashi, most of them did not make it alive. He could see the need for vengeance in the eyes of the rest of Team 10. Two young men and one woman who adored Asuma as he was their sensei and later their friend. Those were emotions that he now understands all too well, for he could have had that sense of loyalty if he had spent more time with Sakura and Naruto. Two of his students who stayed but found others to teach them what they wanted to know. He desperately wanted to make amends to his two former students. Kakashi knew that if anything were to happen then, nothing short of death would make Naruto and Sakura not stop till all of Akatsuki was dead. They were three of his very near and dearest friends to his two former students. He had to go and give them his aid as best he can. "Forgive me, Naruto." Leaping into the trees outside Konoha as he had arrived at his destination, he waited. And it was not long that his waiting was rewarded as Shikamaru, followed shortly by Ino and Choji, came out with intent to go after the two Akatsuki who had killed their teacher. Listening as Tsunade tried to talk them out of it, Kakashi waited for his moment and leapt to the ground. "Then send me with them." They are all startled by the sudden sound of his voice, and they find themselves staring at him as he leans casually against a tree with his all too familiar book in hand. Tsunade, sending him a clear message of what the hell you were doing, stalks over to him, momentarily telling the three younger ninjas to stay. "What about Naruto?" she mutters angrily. "I thought you were going to train him in his father's jutsu." "You knew?" The blonde nods her head angrily in response. "I've always known." "Who do you think Minato asked to come back long enough to help his wife deliver?" Giving a small sigh, Kakashi tells the older blonde woman of his fears for the youth under his protection. An understanding rolls over the older woman's features as she begins to relax as well as worry for the boy she sees as her family. "You really think so?" "Yes," Kakashi said quietly. "If things happen like I suspect they will, you know the three of them will go regardless if you keep me here. And they will get killed regardless of the Nara's genius. At least allow me to help them get a fighting chance, not for my sake, but for theirs and Naruto and Sakura's sanity." "So be it," Tsunade responded with a tinge of regret. "And maybe a little bit of respect. But don't you dare die on me, Kakashi. Naruto and Sakura need you as well." Turning around, the blonde woman yells. "Team 10. You and Kakashi are to go and investigate the presence of the Akatsuki between here and Suna." "Understood, Shikamaru. You are in charge, but you will listen to Kakashi." "Understood." Puzzled by the joining of their friend's favorite teacher to their team, Shikamaru nods his head. Moments later, the four vanish without a trace. In the meantime, Tsunade is already working on a backup plan. Although Kakashi was good, this was Akatsuki after all. He and the others will need more than just them to face off against these ninjas. Time to make a certain blonde learn even faster. Chapter 9. Kakashi found himself fighting the urge to hug Naruto senseless or beat the crap out of him for being such an idiot. The youth was still in the hospital alongside Sakura, Yamato, as well as the rest of Team 10 and himself. The only one of them able to leave though at the moment was everyone but Naruto. Naruto had indeed completed the race in Shuriken as his father the Yondaime had tried to create and would have if not for the Kyuubi. Tsunade had given him an ultimatum essentially before she had sent him as well as Sakura and Yamato to aid them. Essentially, learn the race in Shuriken, know or lose your friends. So Naruto had gotten over halfway through the process before he had taken off after his sensei and Team 10 much like his father would have. Kakashi finds himself remembering with a fond smile. But the smile turns to a sad one as he remembers other things. There were many things his former teacher who had told Kakashi many times as he trained him that he would do once he was able to have a family. Events that he would have counted on Kakashi to be there to do as well as his other students if he could not. Giving a small sound of pained regret as he feels that in many ways he had failed the blonde, he is stunned to find tears flowing down his cheeks. Ones that he did not realize he was giving until a young brown-haired woman, who was quite familiar to many, brushed them away with a clean cloth. "You were worried about him, weren't you?" Startled to find Shizune looking at him with a kind face, Kakashi looks away without saying a word. Never before has he allowed himself to give in to his emotions. At least not since the deaths of his former teammates as well as his father. He had thought there was nothing left in him to really cry about. "He understands more than most think, you know," Shizune said without really directing it towards anyone in particular. "He is just so used to playing what people expect." Turning to her, Kakashi finds himself staring at the profile of the young woman with a gaze that was a mixture of emotions. Some good and some bad, but within that gaze was also a willingness to listen. People had always had expected him to be a fool, to be happy and to be so strong in his beliefs. Today I saw Naruto as I had done only once before. He is very much like what they expect, but one cannot be that way all the time. You can only fill a bottle up with so much water before it flows over the top and makes a mess. But for Naruto and that bottle breaks, who will he turn to help him clean it up? But that said, Shizune walks away, leaving Kakashi to think. And to once again regret over his negligence of the youth who at the moment was surrounded by many of his friends. Sakura was lying on the bed beside him, feeding him ramen as the fifth worked on bandaging his arm. The jutsu that Naruto had completed did indeed work wonders, and the Leaf had taken their first real Akatsuki prisoner. Kakuzu had been captured because of Naruto's jutsu, but the use of it ranked as a forbidden art. for it did do its job and damage Kakuzu to the point all his chakra coils were closed up. But if it wasn't for the fox demon inside him, it would have done the same thing to Naruto. Already he as well as many of the other shinobi had been told that Naruto was never to use it again unless in dire emergencies. It would be ranked a forbidden A-class jutsu skill because of the backlash could kill most ninjas who dared to use it. That's one reason why he wanted to yell at Naruto and beat him senseless himself. Watching the battle the blonde had with that Akatsuki member, he had observed the damage that skill was doing to both parties in the fight. And he had told Naruto that he should not use it, it was taking a lot out of him. The truth of the matter was though if it was not for Naruto going against him and directly using it once more, Kakuzu might have killed them all, regardless of the fact Shikamaru had succeeded in getting rid of his partner Haiden. The way the genius had done it, though, made Kakashi smile. His dear friend Asuma would have been proud. Finding his eyes drifting to the blonde, he knows someone else who had long since left this life would have been proud as well. Senseho, how do I tell him? Hearing the voice of the long-gone Yondaime, Kakashi remembers. There is never a good time to spill a secret, Kakashi, Rin the blonde intones thoughtfully. They had overheard over their return of how Anko had spilled the secrets of her former master Orochimaru to a Hokage who was not at all happy. Isn't it better that it's out? No one can ever get hurt like that again. Rin exclaimed. Someone is always bound to get hurt and regret ever having told. Young and innocent alike, the older man states quietly as he steps in quickly to prevent villagers from attacking the young girl who had betrayed her own sensei to save many. Anko, staring at them in a mixture of confusion, smiles her thanks before she takes off in a flash. But in the end, although the pain is strong, in the end it is worth it for the one who told and the one who is told. And what is it worth, sensei? A young Kakashi asked. His eyes still bandaged from Obito's death months before. The youth struggled to adjust in training now to get used to it and to its gift. Hope and freedom, Kakashi. Hope and freedom. Hope that their secret would be accepted and freedom in the knowledge that they had done what they had to do. Telling it to the person who needed to hear it the most. But that in mind, he opened the door to Naruto's room, gesturing for all to leave them alone for a moment. Tsunade, looking at him with a puzzled expression for a moment, realizes what Kakashi intends to do and nods her head in acceptance. Okay Naruto, as of this moment, you are off the duty roster until I say so. Ba-chan. Glaring at the blonde with her fist raised, Naruto used his arm smartly as a shield, much to Kakashi's amusement and Tsunade's anger. You wouldn't hurt a wounded man, would you, Ba-chan? Naruto asked innocently and with an impish grin. Glaring at him, Tsunade just gives him a look. Just you wait, you little brat, just you wait. She replied with a smile on her face that despite her anger she couldn't help but have. Leaving the two alone now, Naruto gives a smile, but one that is guarded, as he thinks his former teacher is going to yell for not listening to him. What is it, Kakashi-sensei? Hearing the cool and guarded tone in his voice, Kakashi knew Naruto was upset at what he perceived was his virtual abandonment to finish learning the jutsu with Yamato. I'm sorry. Startled by those two words, a pair of blue eyes had to blink several times as they took his confession in. Sorry. For what? There is something I have been meaning to tell you, something I should have noticed long ago but never really did. The copy ninja said as looked at the confused eyes of the youth before him. He hopes that Naruto will forgive him for being even more blind than ever. Kakashi-sensei. The older man looks into the similar features of his former teacher and leader, sighing as he reassures the blonde that he was simply trying to find the right words. Kakashi then turns towards the window as he stands up. His courage failing him, he simply blurts out what he was struggling so tactfully to tell him. I know who your father was. A silence fills the room, one that emanates from both inside it. The only emotion within are ones of fear and anger and confusion. What? Came the voice of his former student, quiet and in shock over those words spoken with such ferocity that he almost choked on the water he was drinking. I know who your father was, Kakashi said quietly and with shame. It was my former teacher, the man who taught me. It takes only a moment before Naruto realizes whom Kakashi was referring to. Cheeks are slowly tinged with red as an anger and sadness overwhelm him. Was that why you ignored me? Bekase. No. No Naruto. Just go. Naruto stated with such vehemence that Kakashi obeyed, leaving the youth alone in his room and Kakashi crying inside with regret and sadness as he walked away. Chapter 10. Kakashi watched with quiet yearning as Naruto worked on his training alongside Sai and Sakura under Yamato's supervision. The former Anbu, although young, was a good choice for the youth in terms of power and in personality to be leader and trainer. Different from himself in so many ways, Yamato had a calm and serene wisdom about him, which helped Naruto to think and not act first. At the moment they had returned from a mission that had been hushed up. That although classified as a failure, it also served as a permanent placement of the young ink ninja Sai as part of the team. Brooding and a little blunt, Sai was like Sasuke to some degree and in others he was not. But yet, with his addition, a life came to both of his former students. One that helped them to think and to be able to talk about their missing friend better. It was that air given by both newcomers which caused Naruto to often speak and question the other men about so many things involving jutsus and even life in general. That Kakashi was hurting inside as he watched this was strange and painful, for it was supposed to be him that the blonde turned to. Not Yamato. Not Sai. Punching his fist hard into a wall, it is Tsunade who stands there with her eyes filled with honest-to-goodness compassion. Wee does it hurt so much? He looked at her pleadingly with his one good eye. Despite the ninja code that he followed to a T with his own set of rules, Tsunade could almost see the anguish and jealousy deep in his soul. Because deep down you know it could have been you standing there and not Yamato. Tsunade responded. Has he still not spoken to you? Shaking his head, Tsunade lets out a quiet sigh. So you do not know either of what happened then? I figured he would have told you. Told me what? I ran into Sasuke. Whirling to look at her, Tsunade already shook her head as if to head him off at the pass. No, they did not bring him back. He had fled with Orochimaru after their meeting, where Sasuke once again tried to kill Naruto. I see, so he was after it then, Kakashi said quietly. Kakashi? I had often wondered what would make Sasuke want to kill Naruto. The bond between those two boys was strong. Almost like brothers, even so why would Sasuke kill him? The copy ninja stated with a mixture of disgust and sadness. It turns out he was after the Manjikyu, isn't that? Itachi's Sharingan in the ultimate form? Yes, but unlike myself, here is another and faster way to get from what I have researched. The user must kill their closest and dearest friend. Hailing at those words, Tsunade struggled not to faint. Why? I do not know. Kakashi said honestly. The only person, or should I say being, who knows the answer to that, and as far as I know refuses to answer, currently resides within Naruto. The Kyuubi. Nodding his head, Kakashi grasps his hands once more on the railing of the rooftop. The fox was the one who created the Sharingan within the Uchiha clan. I see, it explains the report that Naruto gave me. Report? Yes, that incident I told you about. Sasuke apparently now has the ability to go within the seal. And according to what Naruto has stated, Fox knew what clan Sasuke was from and compared it to the strength of Madara Uchiha. Silent for a moment, Kakashi is thoughtful and pensive. Turning to look at the elder blonde, he has a worried look on his features that begins to frighten her. What is it, Kakashi? I think history is going to repeat itself, and badly, Tsunade-sama. I don't know why or even how this feeling, but I have a feeling we are heading for the next shinobi war, and Sasuke and Naruto will be in the middle of it, Kakashi ate quietly. And it will destroy them, as my grandfather and uncle were. Nodding his head, he turns to look at the blonde whose gaze drifts towards him from down below. Frowning in anger and rage, the youth drags Sakura and the others with him to go elsewhere. Much to the pain in Kakashi's heart. You may have to order him to train with me, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi said quietly. Naruto has the power, just not the knowledge. As much as he will hate me for doing, I'd agree. The older woman stated. Get him ready, Kakashi, let's try to avoid history. I'm not going to lose Naruto to that fate. That brat asked for my job years ago, and I am going to make damn sure he's around to take it. Chapter 11. I do not own Naruto. Chapter 11. As he continued to try to aid his son, Minato was also trying to please an angry death god. Despite everything he had done was against the being's soul wishes. The Shinigami had understood the desperation the former Hokage had towards the young boy, who had a great but pain-filled destiny. A youth who was his son, but the youth had a destiny which could not be denied. This fate the youth had was one to save the fate of his world. Without him, this world was doomed to destruction. This was why he was subtly aiding Minato in his efforts to push his son towards the one man who could help him, one Kakashi Haddock. But Naruto was of course being stubborn, much like his father. Hence while his father pulled the strings and placed hints in the minds of those he could talk to. He was approaching this from another angle. The angle of the demon that resides within the seal. The Shinigami knew that the Kyuubi had just as much a vested interest in the welfare of his jailer than even said jailer knew about. So while Naruto was asleep that night in his own apartment, the death god paid a visit to the mighty fox in his cell. So what brings the almighty god of a death to my jail cell? Am I to be freed? The red demon chuckled wryly. It knows full well the answer to be no, but is startled as the Shinigami looks at him with a pointed gaze. It could be arranged. Knowing that there is always a catch with the being before him, the Kyuubi narrows its beastly eyes as it stares at one of the ones responsible for his situation. What, or should I say, who would I have to kill? Kill? No, Ane, you already know who this boy that contains you is fated to face. And that will not be easy with the path he is choosing. Thoughtful at once, the Kyuubi sits back on its hind legs in contemplation. Finally it chuckles evilly at what the god is referring to. The Gaki is PSST at the one-eyed one. And to be honest, I really don't blame him. Nor do I, but come what may, you and the boy have a shared destiny. If you do not push him to go with the other, not only will you fail in your vengeance, but you will die along with him. With no chance of rebirth. I know my sentence, death god, the Kyuubi growled. But must it really be the Cyclops? Why can I not train him in my powers? The pointed expression is directed towards the unrepentant fox demon that looks smug. You and I both already know that answer, that beast. Although it deprived the boy of his father and mother, if he had not stopped and summoned me when he did, this world would have suffered far more than what is to happen. What can I say? I was angry. Do you blame me? That thing and his little servants killed my kids. It is the only reason why I have not exerted my powers beyond this blasted seal as I could have. You know this thing stopped holding me years ago. That is true, it is. Why have you not? Saying nothing, the fox just looks at him and the god smiles. You respect your jailer. I admit the meat shield has grown on me. There has been many times as he grew that he could have used my power to not only set me free, but to also destroy everything in this rotten little village. Instead he has grown, and as he grew he has changed the ideals of those very ones who condemned him. Nodding his head and understanding, the god looked at the being who was calm from within its cell. So you will speak with your jailer? Yes, he will point out something about the other, that if they are to fight before all else is done, the one-eyed one is the only one who can teach him its weakness. It's up to the Cyclops after that. Agreed. For this I will speak to the others on your rebirth. You better. I do not relish being inside this flesh bag any longer than I have to be. That said, the god departs the seal and the slumbering jailer. As he does so, he finds gazing high up in a tree, with a quiet and sad longing expression on his face, was the one-eyed ninja whom desires to go on protecting this young man with all his heart or die trying. 533. Chapter 12. I do not own Naruto. Sue Fox think about 2-3 weeks. Prescripto 13. What happens to Naruto, happens to him, does it not? The Kyuubi may be able to exert more of influence, but he chooses not to. Basically, although he will more than likely never admit it, he is starting to look at Naruto as one of his own children or kid. In animal terms, Naruto in the beginning would have been looked at as weak. Which is why the Kyuubi tried often when he was younger to break out of his cell, but as Naruto grew older and began to resist the pull of his influence even more, he was gaining the demon's respect. Because he was in a sense fighting back and growing stronger on his own. Now all he needs is guidance, and sometimes that needs a little slap upside the head, so to speak. P.S. For those of you who like A Life for a Life, I am currently fixing the story to reflect the recent discovery of Naruto's parents. So far the first 11 chapters have been fixed and new things added to them. Just to let you know. Chapter 12. Naruto was angry. Scratch that, he was beyond angry. He was downright furious at what his Bachan had told him to do. The older woman, whom as much as involved in this as she was, had ordered him to train with Kakashi when not in missions. Needless to say, his destructive capabilities matched hers that morning as he went ballistic. Knowing he could never hurt the older woman, whom had done more than most when it came to keeping his secret and to keeping his sanity intact from time to time, he had immediately left to the training grounds and let loose so many Rasengans upon it that the groundskeepers will be working it well until next week, with the aid of those ninjas with the special affinities for it. Aki, if you don't calm down, I'm going to personally do a few things from here to make you regret giving me a restless nap. Startled by the voice of the fox, Naruto finds himself in a trance as he is brought down to the seal. Watching as once again the smoke from before manifests itself, the Kyuubi is looking at him with malevolent red eyes. Eyes narrowing as the Kyuubi glares at him, Naruto can't help but wonder. Why did you bring me down here, you damn fox? Because they're right, fleshbag, you need the one-eyed one if you are going to get your friend back. Growling in response to that comment, the Kyuubi responds in kind with a growl of his own. One that is far more deadly than any Naruto could ever give. Although he is admittedly afraid of what this beast could do to his mind and body from inside him, Naruto gazes into this vicious eyes with a stubbornness to rival that of a god. He can't teach me anything new. Then you already lost Meat Shield. You forget he was the one who taught your spirit brother, the one you went to get back, that little skill that punched an arm through your chest, or have you forgotten? Startled, Naruto looks guilty as he realizes that the demon is right by his comments. Finding the fox staring at him smugly, he turns away to hide his shame. So focused on getting Sasuke back and surviving Akatsuki, he had forgotten that his friend had almost killed him years ago with that technique. You've forgotten that, I see. Shut up, you damn fox. Chuckling maliciously, the fox ignores him, continuing to speak the truth. Listen, little jailer, you already know your friend is strong and more than likely knows a lot more techniques now, just like that one that can and will kill us. That one-eyed one that you are angry at was the one who invented it, and he was the one who taught the Uchiha. Don't you think, you moronic little morsel, he would also know its weakness as well as that of the other? Caught off guard by the fox's words, the blonde found himself thrust out of the seal with a parting shot made by the fox. Think about it and take advantage of what he knows. Through him you might just succeed. Gaki. -88888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888atatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatat He was concerned about Naruto. The youth was, according to Tsunade, far from pleased at the order given to him to come and work with himself upon jutsus to survive not only Akatsuki A jutsus that could possibly save a lost friend and missing brother in arms for the blonde, and most of these jutsus that Kakashi was intent on showing him were ones that Minato had taught him, including the Horiishin. So to say he was surprised to already find the said youth there, meditating. Kakashi was not only surprised but grateful. Maybe there was a chance to earn the youth's forgiveness after all. But as blue eyes opened and looked at him coldly, the older man couldn't help but sigh. There was hope for him, but who's to say Naruto was going to make it easy? Chapter 13. To say Naruto was not pleased at how these last couple of weeks had been would be an understatement. Forced in his opinion, to train with the legendary copy ninja, Naruto was exceptionally hostile during training. Kakashi, someone who had supposed to be his teacher, his trainer for when he was younger and not do it well, it hurt him a lot. It hurt him even more that those times he really needed someone to talk as he grew up the only adult male he should have been able to confide in other than Iruka was Kakashi. Iruka was the father figure as a child, but as he grew, Naruto realized that the Chunin was more of a brother than a father to him. It didn't really make a difference though, for if it wasn't for the dark-haired ninja, Naruto might never have been able to do the things he had done. Kakashi on the other hand, despite his lateness or his lazy kind of attitude, when things mattered he protected Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke. He set down the rules when time came, he actually made time to be with them to a degree. But well, when it came to things important, it felt like he and Sakura played second fiddle to Sasuke. And over time Naruto started to lose his faith in the one man whom before this had started, the blonde looked to as a father. Those words that day on top of the hospital, before Sasuke had left, they hurt. It had hurt him so much to be scolded for using what was his father's prize technique and not to hear Sasuke get the same for using the Chidori. It hurt even more that unlike Sakura and the others who spent time writing to him via Jiraiya, that not once did Kakashi do the same. Naruto focus. "Aye Kakashi-sensei." The youth muttered coldly. The older man winced a little bit at the tone, looks with regret at the blonde that confuses him greatly. Enough that Naruto wonders did Kakashi truly regret not talking to him. Shaking his head free of that little childlike hope within, the blonde hardens his gaze once more. Glaring as he continues to work on the instructions alongside his clones, the youth turns his back on the man. Never noticing the sorrow and the longing for acceptance. Therefore he was surprised as Naruto all of a sudden asks him something that catches him off guard. "Why did you not tell me before?" Pausing in surprise as this is the first time Naruto has started to willingly speak with him. Kakashi looks at the blonde that despite the cold and bitterness of disappointment in his eyes. There is a lost little boy searching for something or someone to hold on to. The little boy that even at this moment unknowingly reaches out to the spirit of said man who starts to cry with his own pain. Minato listened and felt the sadness in the voice of his son. His only child that by all accounts should have had felt love and joy as a little boy, but instead knew nothing but hate. Already he begged and pleaded with the god of death that when it came time for Iruka to come and sit for judgment that he be allowed to speak for the Chunin. The Shinigami had humored him for a moment and simply said there was no need. The dark-haired man's kind and gentle heart towards Naruto had plain out guaranteed him a spot in the light. Same goes for many others that had over the years had made the little boy grow and know that even though he knew mostly hate, there was in fact some good in the world. The ramen chef owner and his daughter Tsunade, Jiraiya, Rock Lee, Hinata and many others. There was even some that because of his son being there that he was saving with his presence. Two who would have had far more miserable fates in store for them if Naruto had died. Sasuke and Kakashi, their fates were still undetermined at this time in the eyes of the Shinigami. But their destiny, though rested alongside that of Naruto. To fight what was needed was power, yes, but bonds that not only Naruto must feel, but the Kyuubi as well. Sasuke was indeed a brother in all but blood to the fox vessel, but unknowingly to both youths, the fox had felt similar issues because of that fateful day in the Valley of the End. The fox was not stupid, the killing intent was there in both of the boys at that time. But what was overriding it though was the scent of kinship and understanding. They knew despite all denials on the Uchiha's part. They knew what had passed between them, and that was why Naruto was so desperate to save the dark-haired teen from the snake. Something that even now as Minato watches Kakashi struggle to answer could see starting to now form between his son and his former student. A familial bond. Naruto didn't know. Kakashi said reluctantly. Before Naruto could protest that, Kakashi holds up his hand. "Please let me finish, I didn't know, but I think it was because I was afraid." "Why?" The teenager replied sadly and with bitterness. "Because of my tenant." The older man looks at Naruto helplessly and with complete pain and sadness as he shrugs. "No, I don't now looking at you now, though I think it was because you look so much like him. So much so that I was scared to get close." That said, the copy ninja vanishes in a rush of emotions in front of the blonde youth. The confusion evident still in Naruto's eyes, it is at the moment that Tsunade steps forward. Having been watching quietly from the shadows, she knew somehow this was the day to observe the young man that she considered family. After all, she was the one person whom Naruto looks to as a mother and who now knows she is needed. Care to talk, Naruto-kun? Chapter 14. Tsunade smiled as Naruto stepped into the Hokage offices first. Allowing her to close the door behind him, the youth looked at her with a perplexed and sad expression. "What is wrong with me, Bachan?" the blonde said forlornly as he gazes up at her with his bright blue eyes. The older woman looks at him and gently hugs him close before parting away. "Let me show you Naruto," the woman states with a gentle smile. "Although I know you see your father's face on the monument every day, maybe you never noticed the painting of him here in the office. There's paintings." Chuckling softly in amusement, as the blonde has more often than not been a little oblivious to things, she gestures to a series of 5 images. "Your father is the one right before mine, Naruto. That is how he looks." Now as he starts gulping a bit, the 15-year-old feels like he is 5 years old again. For as he approaches the images of the past Hokages, what should be a joy for him in truly seeing an image of his departed father becomes pain. Shaking his head free of dark thoughts, of disappointment and regret, Naruto strides over and looks at the image next to that of Tsunade's and the third. What he sees is what surprises him. Because except for the marks on his cheeks, the painting was an exact duplicate of himself. "I see you know how much you look like him." Clutching his hand into a fist, the blonde resists the urge to punch something hard. His own mind in turmoil, at this he looks at the older woman with a mixture of so many negative emotions that she reaches out to grasp his hands. Her eyes mirroring his pained expression as he drops to his knees in front of her in tears. "Then why doesn't everyone know? Why don't people know that their great hero is my father? Why didn't Kakashi or any of the others acknowledge me?" "It is because they choose not to, Naruto," Tsunade whispered sadly. "Most of the villagers worshipped your father. To them he was their hero, he saved them all. To lose him as they did was a nightmare, and to many for him to place the Kyuubi in you. I don't think they could understand it, nevertheless accepted. It would mean their hero did something that in their eyes was awful." A small reluctant understanding dawns in Naruto's eyes, but it quickly disappears as thoughts of his sensei and the favoritism shown to a missing and dear friend. A brother in all but blood. "I can understand that, Bachan, but it does not give him an excuse," Naruto stated coolly. "Naruto, listen to me for a second." "No, I won't." "Every time, Bachan. Every damn time I ever wanted his help. Asked for his advice. Every time he turned me away. Why should I turn to him now? It doesn't matter that my father was his teacher. What matters is that he was supposed to be my teacher. The one person I was to trust to show me how to use my skills, the one person who was supposed to show me how to achieve my dreams. The one person who gave me rules, who gave me direction, everything that a father does. But he did nothing else but teach me tree walking to control my errant chakra. He never noticed the seal Orochimaru had put on me after the exams. And you can't tell me he didn't know about the Kyuubi then. I know damn well he did." Stalking out in intense anger at that moment, the blonde woman sighs as another steps from the shadows. "I told you not to interfere, Tsunade," Jiraiya said quietly and with regret. Naruto has many years of rage inside him. To many, and what Kakashi did, or should I say didn't do, would and will be hard to forget. Then what do we do, Jiraiya? He needs Kakashi beside him. You heard his words, didn't you? Reluctantly the Toad-san nods his head. Yes. Deep down there is still a strong need to make Kakashi proud of him as a father would a son. Chapter 15. Minato was in pain. He was in serious pain as he watched Kakashi and his son continue training, despite the reluctance in one half of the pair to be around the other. He was in pain because he saw what was coming. Soon they would be off for news of his son's missing brother in spirit. Being where he was, as the Uchiha clan was massacred, he had felt sorry for the youngest boy. He was surprised at the sad and yet knowing comment of the death god as one by one the once overly proud clan came in. Sometimes pride cometh before the fall. Predators say that the Uchihas were a prideful clan would be quite true. Not only that, but their arrogance was a definite slam in the negative as well. But as he tried to talk to the Shinigami about it, the death god simply looked at him with a sad and yet painful smile. Naruto is the catalyst to heal him. Confused, as he watched the events unfolding, Minato realized what his son was achieving unlike many others in the village. He was turning the last of the loyal Uchihas into someone whom otherwise would face a dark fate. He had asked why so many had to die. The Shinigami had simply looked at him and told him their fate was determined because Sasuke was still innocent, still naive somewhat, he could be saved. And slowly, his son was succeeding into changing the young survivor into a normal human. The young boy was becoming approachable, unlike his former clansmen. And it was because of his son, his lonely son, who showed him what it meant to be a child. When by all rights he should be, rather than being forced to grow into something he is not. A martyr. It was at that moment that the spirit of his wife had come to join him. Lost in thought as he was, Kushina had caught him off guard. Especially as she had come running up to him to hug him as she placed kisses all over his face. Happy and clutching her dearly to him, never wanting to let her go. His wings wrapping themselves around both himself and her. The two watched in sadness as their son trained with Kakashi, the woman being held back from wanting to go to her little boy, who screams out for love and approval. But it was only moments later that Minato could not help but look at the death god in puzzlement at this unexpected pleasure of his wife beside him. For despite everything he had expected to be alone with the god for all eternity. He will need her calm soon. It was at that moment that the Shinigami waved his hand and forwarded time. Although there was almost a cold tension between them, his son and Kakashi were on a mission of importance, along with Sakura and a new kid named Sai. Beside them were obviously a Inuzuka, an Aburam, and a Hyuga. They were tracking something, but it was in the second set of images that caused Minato to tremble. Jiraiya entering rain territory where the ninja Pain was. Even the heavens trembled at the time when Pain would come. This ninja alone had brought about many deaths, and for Minato to watch his beloved teacher and sensei go into that man's territory. Your son will soon receive his first inheritance. The death god said sadly. He will soon become the next Toad Sage. Minato screamed his pain at those words. It was so loud and so mournful at that singular statement of the god. That nature herself reacted to his emotional turmoil. All over the 5 nations a sad yet howling wind bit through villagers and ninja alike. Some ignored, but most fought the urge to cry. The pain in the wind was enough to make them wish that whoever was hurting would soon be at peace. Chapter 16. The howling wind was indeed felt by many and all involved on the real world. The sorrow was genuine within its coldness, and the anguish caused many to get closer together. As if to protect those bonds that they have. To those in the summoning world, Gamabunta had felt the connection between himself and the most irritating pervert severe and in such a way that despite everything, he mourned the death of a friend. Hey pops, are we going to let bro hold the contract now? Looking down at Gamakichi, the boss toad simply nods his head. Don't know son, it depends if he can prove himself worthy to not just me but to the others. Knowing who his pops refers to, Gamakichi says nothing else. Unlike most of the other summons creatures, the toads like the snakes were most peculiar about whom they would work with. Jiraiya the age-old pervert was fated to hold it and did so as the first one in hundreds of years, according to the ancient toad seers. With his death the only one who could summon them was Naruto. What would he have to do pops? That's up to the elders. Nothing else at all. Gamakichi and the other toads that had come to like the prankster blonde. All that was heard though was a low keening wail of mourning as the death of a summoner hit the world of the greater beasts. But as it passed it awakened another summons beast. The beast that can sense one that is like them in so many ways that it smiles with impish anticipation. And it is the same one of which the elder toads were working with right now. Is it a deal? The elder toad sage asked his fellow summons companions. An elder from each of the companions was there at the home of this new summons realm opening up. One that because of this sadness had not opened in close to 1,000 years. Will you allow him to hold ours and yours? The elder white fox known simply as Kitsune fans out at several tails as he nods his head in agreement. Our children and yours shall work with the one known as Naruto Uzumaki. He will have your power but our speed. Agreed. Till those that should he live come to call his own are ready to guard our contracts. -888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888. Interjecting some new things. Chapter 17. Tracking Sasuke as he did, Naruto was admittedly hopeful of running into his friend again. The fact that a clone was taken out, the youth immediately knew what direction he had run to. This strange mantis one in the weird mask had impeded his way. It was long enough that now he wonders where did his friend go. Musing about what to do next, he does not notice the various expressions on the faces of his companions. But as that wind hits, Naruto feels a sense of loss hit him. A loss that feels so close to home that out of need and instinct the youth immediately summons a beast. Ignorant of the others who scramble to get out of the way as a large cloud of smoke emerges, all including the blonde are surprised as not just a toad appears. So does a 5-tailed red fox. The familiar presence of Gamakichi, who stares mournfully at Naruto, was comforting. But the fact that he holds a familiar scroll with him. One that is very recognizable as the contract. The fact that the fox holds one as well was puzzling. The fact that the two looked at one another, Naruto as well as the others, could see the silent communication between the two beasts. Both beasts, although childlike in appearance and demeanor, were wearing kimonos of black as if in mourning. It was the presence of Pakin, also in black, who had appeared without being summoned, who spoke volumes. Because it is very rare that a summons creature does so unless something is to be imparted. Pakin. Greetings Kakashi, the dog said quietly. Follow me please. The copy ninja, confused at the request of his longtime tracker friend, followed the little dog into the woods. The rest of the team looked at one another in confusion as both the fox with the scroll in the tails and Gamakichi approached Naruto. I'm sorry bro, we'll miss him. Even Pops mourns. Confused and wondering even more. A look of almost panicky fear as the fox approaches with his own words. Feminine voice speaking out softly, the red fox looked with a nuzzling sorrow as she brushed against his leg as if to offer him comfort. I am sorry too. From what the toads told me, he was a good man. It was at that moment that a sad sound of surprise and regret emitted from Sakura as Kakashi himself re-emerged with Pakin. The blonde shaking his head as if in disbelief at what the words have implied are only emphasized as Pakin howls. "What's going on?" Naruto, Kakashi states quietly. "No, he can't be," the blonde whimpered out as he tries to back away. Sakura preventing him, as she had put two and two together, she simply hugs him in that moment. "Naruto," whispered the pink-haired girl quietly as she started to approach her friend when he wrenched away as if to get away from the implication and the sorrow in Kakashi's gaze. "Naruto, it's Jiraiya." "No. He's not dead. Damn it. He's not dead." Naruto screamed out. The demonic aura of the Kyuubi flaring up, Kakashi quickly whips out a seal and slams it on top of the blonde's forehead. For once, he is grateful to those tiny slips of paper. Grateful for the rest it will give Naruto. As Naruto passes out, he catches the youth with the aid of the fox summons, who cushioned his head with her tails as Kakashi laid the youth down. "What's going on?" Kiba asked quietly in his confusion. Akamaru, understanding the howls Pakin has been doing, he himself starts howling in sorrow for his friend's loss. "It's the pervy sage," Gamakichi said quietly. "He's dead." Naruto is now the Toad Guardian. Eyes widen at the implication of the little toad's words. One of the three Sannin, the greatest ninja ever to come out of Konoha, save for the Yondaime, was gone. His title passed on apparently to their knuckle-headed friend. It was at that moment that the little fox who gently rumbles her belly that catches their attention now. "I am here to offer him a rare chance to become the first to summon my kind in over 1500 years," the red fox stated quietly. "My name is Katala." Chapter 18. It has been 3 days since the news of Jiraiya's death had spread across the 5 shinobi nations. Morning colors flew in Konoha as the tracker team returned. Having lost track of Sasuke, the fact that there would be a memorial for the Toad Sannin, Kakashi had ordered the return of both teams to Konoha. Twice since then he had been forced to use those slips of paper to knock Naruto out, to keep the Kyuubi from exerting its control. But more to keep Naruto from going out and getting himself killed in a need for vengeance for his fallen teacher. He was thankful for the presence of Akamaru, the massive dog with Kiba's directions, had allowed Naruto to be strapped to his backside. And considering the mutt was just as quick as them, it allowed the team to move at a reasonable fast pace without losing time. Setting up the camp for the last night before their official arrival, Kakashi looked to find Naruto being eased up off of Akamaru. After being laid down and onto the ground gently, Kakashi approaches and keeps watch over the blonde like a father would his son. The others, who were Naruto's friends, smiled gently at the quiet steadfast gaze of the older man who looked out for him. That of someone who cared. "Kakashi-sensei will be fine," Sakura whispered softly. "Come eat." Hinata curling up next to Naruto to watch over him as the medic pulls the copy ninja away. When it had first happened, it was the presence of Hinata as well that had soothed the blonde. The way they figured it was something about her scent that calmed Naruto. That allowed him to take comfort in her warmth. It was also the only way they had been able to get Kakashi to eat. For other than struggling to knock Naruto out, they have noticed that the normally together ninja and their knuckle-headed friend had been quiet. Almost alone compared to their camaraderie of the past. Amakichi having left, he entrusted the scroll to those whom Naruto knew well. Namely Sakura, who held it tightly to her, but it was their newest companion who stunned them all. The little fox had patrolled in Naruto's stead when they camped for the night. In fact, it was twice that they had found ninjas, while albeit not dead, were trapped in genjutsu so powerful that not even Kakashi could break unless Katala willed it. And she did all this while carrying the scroll she intended for Naruto to have when he was alright. Unusual for a summons, as they long expected her to have vanished by now. But Katala had simply looked at them and gave a mischievous grin. Seconds later, several doppelgangers of her in various colors emerged, and well as they ran through fire and trees, the little fox taught them a lesson. It is true we foxes are dangerous when angered. But part of what you see is also not real. We are the masters of illusion. Ask yourself. How much of Konoha did our former lord really destroy that day? This had put the team as well as their leaders in deep thought. Shino, being the unofficial leader in place of Kurenai as she was on pregnancy leave, was the first to have spoken. "Kakashi-sama, is it true what she says about that day the Nine Tails attacked?" Silent and thoughtful Kakashi nods his head. "Although we lost many that day, what was destroyed were things we had made. Things that we as a whole village had built. It was like the Kyuubi wanted to remove traces of us from his lands. Not the land itself." Smirking within the seal, the Kyuubi just nods his head as he mused within his cage. "I am a creature of nature. When something feels tainted to my land, I want to remove it." Not aware of the malicious nature of the beast within their friend's body, this allowed the others of Naruto's small group to think. But this time it was Sakura who spoke. Her voice quiet and delicate, the young woman looked up at Kakashi thoughtfully. "Temari-sama once told me alongside Gaara-san that to defeat a Biju was impossible. They were nature and chakra itself. You can't defeat what was there to make life to begin with." Her words rocking through those around them, Kakashi became alert, as did Hinata when Naruto started to come to. The blonde blinking sleepy blue eyes as well as ones filled with pain and sadness. "You okay, Naruto?" Kakashi said quietly. His hands reaching for the slips of paper, Naruto held his hand up and shook his head. "Dauntless. I'm alright, I won't run off." The blonde moaned in protest as he not only noticed their surroundings were different but their readiness to chase after him. "Where are we?" "About a day's run from Konoha, Naruto-kun. Kakashi-sen thought you might want to be there for Jiraiya-sen's memorial." Hinata replied softly. "Kakashi-sen sent Pakken-kun to get the details as we made our way back. It's the day after tomorrow." Hearing her words, the blonde finds himself looking at the older man who is walking away in disbelief. "Kakashi-sensei, you did that for me?" Pausing in mid-step, the others watch as the copy nin simply nods his head before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Chapter 19. Naruto was quiet. For the first time in a while, he was so quiet to the point that the villagers, whether they liked him or not, were worried. Never before had the loudmouth ninja been so silent to the point that even they wondered if he was alright. The memorial was really affecting their knuckle-headed ninja. Sakura beside him as well as several others of the best crop of ninjas his age, the small group of young men and women, offered him what comfort they could. The pink-haired medic nin, an heir to their Godim's legacy, was holding tightly onto one hand. As the Hyuga heiress was holding onto the other, both girls' hands were clutching his as despite his silence, tears flowed down his cheeks in rivers of sadness. This time, not a single villager chased him away. And also many minds were fully changed because as they stared at the features of the blonde, regardless of who they reminded them of, no demon would mourn a Sannin as much as this boy was. Demons would celebrate the death of their enemies, would they not? Inside the seal, the Kyuubi studies to grave through Naruto's eyes. The youth never noticing how his senses have been enhanced and thanks to the being inside him. The fox demon mourns himself for the loss of someone who helped make his container strong. After all, regardless of whether or not it would be a pain in the ass to be reborn until that time comes, this man was responsible for keeping him and his jailer alive for close to 3 years. "Thank you, pervy sage, thank you for being there for me when no one else would," Naruto whispered forlornly, and all of a sudden. Never realizing he spoke aloud, Naruto's words were heard by not only his friends around him, but by a gray-haired ninja whose heart almost breaks from the sad tone of loneliness in his voice. Never before has Kakashi found himself resenting a dead man like he does Jiraiya. The affection and the love in Naruto's voice were evident and something that the copy ninja should have had long before the Toad Sage came onto the scene. Tsunade having heard Naruto's words, that albeit innocent as they were, she knew the copy ninja was hurting now. But maybe it was a beginning for the older man to really truly understand the young blonde. Although Iruka was a elder brother, herself a mother in the eyes of her favorite ninja, it was to Kakashi himself that Naruto started associating fatherhood. Approaching the younger man as the memorial started to end, the blonde smiled a soft and gentle gaze. "Give him time, Kakashi." The blonde woman stated quietly. She, herself, was in mourning for the loss of a dearest friend and former teammate. But knowing how she must be strong for the young boy who needs her now. She had chosen to quietly get drunk when the news had hit her before his return. For once Shizune had allowed her that much. "Give him time, Kakashi. You already made one step in the direction." The blonde smiled softly. "He's here, is he not?" Confused for a moment, Kakashi finds himself gazing into the eyes of his two students. It is at that moment that the blonde spoke. "Kakashi-sensei." "Yes, Naruto. Teach me more. Help me become strong. So I won't lose any more of my precious people." A small and proud smile erupted onto the copy ninja's lips as Sakura had repeated the same thing to Tsunade. Hinata and the others around them, Kakashi nods his head in acceptance of the request. "DOMORROW8 meet me on the bridge." Chapter 20. Crash, bang, thud. The say Naruto was enthusiastic about the training was true. Slam, smack, crash. They also say it was for a variety of reasons, of which revenge was a part of, was also true to those watching the sessions. Kakashi was relieved Naruto had started to talk to him again. But it was more or less it was a truce of sorts. Naruto would simply listen and do what Kakashi instructed. But the blonde was most assuredly upset. Not that anyone could blame him. Sakura cautiously spoke to Tsunade just the other day of some of the memories of the departed Sannin. Memories that, although it was like watching a boy and a perverted uncle in their minds, they couldn't help but smile. Jiraiya had given Naruto a sense of familial acceptance. It was through the Toad Sage that Naruto had really truly understood what each of the precious people in his life really meant to him. And it increased his desire only more to become Hokage. So that he can protect them fully. It was then that realized on that trip that Iruka was more like a caring big brother and not a father. That Tsunade herself had become his mother as Sakura and Shizune were sisters. Crash, whap, thud. What made them sad were the memories which were shared with Jiraiya concerning that day in the Valley of the End. Ones that made even Sakura cry as it brought Tsunade to a quiet kind of sadness that was very much unlike the normally strong woman. "Sakura, I will teach you more. Maybe with your help history can stop repeating itself. I think that will be the greatest thing I can do to remember Jiraiya." Admittedly confused at first, the young woman understood as her teacher told her of the dream that Toad-san in first hand long ago. When his friend left, much like Sasuke did. But unlike Sarutobi, Kakashi, despite his favoritism in the beginning, had done something that the third had never done. He interfered in his students' fights. Several times, it was the copy ninja who had kept the two boys from killing each other in their rivalry. Several times, Kakashi was the one who set down the rules. He was the one before the exams and everything started who advised them. Who helped them to believe in themselves in the beginning. It was he who taught them the meaning of bonds, crash, whack, slam, which was another reason why she is making sure that Kakashi and Sakura was around Naruto as often as she could from here on out. Especially Kakashi, because maybe, just maybe, the fact that should Sasuke and Naruto meet again, he might be able to do something their old sensei could not. Tsunade reflected to herself that day. Save what is left, Sarutobi could not. Maybe Kakashi could. Thud. THWAP. Bang. 533. Chapter 21. I do not own Naruto. Prescripto 13. You don't know about the fact that, like Kakashi, Sarutobi inadvertently played favorites and everything. The comparison between Sarutobi and his team to Kakashi and his is actually closer than to Minato and his. Essentially, match the Sannin at the moment with his or her apprentice, and history has literally repeated itself in the series. The only difference is that unlike the third, Kakashi has actually tried to do something about it. Chapter 21. In the weeks following the death of the Toad Sage, Naruto and his friends as well as Kakashi had gone out on missions. The truth still standing, it had become almost a fragile sort of bond of trust between them. Kakashi had gone out of his way several times to not only give his approval to the youth who had craved it so much. He also began to tell stories of his time with said youth's father. Naruto and the others just sat in amazement at the copy ninja's words in those times. Several times, the others would make comments about how it made sense that Naruto had an obsession with orange and ramen. For it only made sense considering his father did. How his bright and stubborn personality had come from his mother. Memories that made the campfires warm and inviting during those mission away, rather than cold and filled with concern. It was during one of these nights that the death god had allowed Minato and his wife to go down and see their son up close. He was listening to the story of how they had met via Kakashi, along with Sakura and Sai. The latter of which, who was doodling another picture, Kushina had taken a peek and squealed with happiness. Minato, take a look at this. The blonde man, reluctant to leave the youth that was his son, he walks over towards his wife and is struck with surprise at the images Sai was drawing in one of his notebooks. Somehow, using Kakashi's words and his own imagination, the ink ninja had given an accurate, almost exact image of that day in Konoha where they had met. It was when his gorgeous wife had dumped ramen on his lap for saying something inappropriate à la Jiraiya. I still remember having to go to the hospital for that. Minato glared mutinously at his wife and sensei. The latter of had just arrived. Happy to see him, albeit he wished under better circumstances, Minato had asked that Jiraiya be allowed to come and visit Naruto with them. The death god had of course agreed. But only after asking the pervert for advice on peeping, which pissed off Kushina and made Minato giggle like a schoolboy again. It seems even gods were perverts at times too. Giggling, Kushina just shrugged as Jiraiya joins the watch over the young man and his friends. Not my fault, you listened to him. Growling in annoyance now even more at the reminder, Jiraiya hastily starts to back away as Minato eyes him with an impish grin. At that moment, as he starts to run, a brilliant flash of yellow crosses across the campsite. Blowing out the fire for that split second, it is what halted Kakashi's story and made the three teens pause in confusion. Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked in perplexed tones. Did we just see what I thought I saw? A yellow flash? Sai worded in amazement. Not one to show emotion, even he was caught off guard by this. Especially as he watched his newfound friend stand up and look around. That moment Kushina had forgotten all about the drawing and rushed to her son's side. Her hands reaching out to touch his skin, Minato himself having forgotten his plans for mischief with his sensei. The man joining his wife to reach out to his son, Naruto smiles as despite not being able to feel their presence. Naruto, the two spirits are whispering softly. He can feel their love. Kakashi-sensei. Do you think he and my mom are watching us? The gray-haired man fires a Kaiten jutsu into the embers of their fire pit as he turns to stare at the youth who looks at him with hope. A smile on his features, he looks on his student. A student who now looks at him with that same needful gaze that he himself remembers asking Minato. When his father had died. I believe so, Naruto, I believe so. Chapter 22. I do not own Naruto. Goro no Tsubasa. Okay, from what I understand, according to bits and pieces in the anime and manga, Minato is the only one who did not play favorites with his genin team out of Kakashi, himself and the third. History is essentially repeating itself at the moment concerning the circumstances behind the third and Kakashi's team. The only difference at the moment is that unlike Sarutobi and Tsunade, who did not do much of anything to prevent the fights between Jiraiya and Orochimaru, Kakashi and Sakura honestly are trying to do that between Naruto and Sasuke. Prescripto 13 why not? Don't gods have needs too? Haha. Spoiler alert to the manga in this one guys if you have not gotten as far as me. Chapter 22. More time would pass as Naruto would chase for news of his missing friend. His brother in spirit, Sasuke himself was keeping word of his friend's progress. Despite the fact he and Itachi are related by blood. He and Naruto. They had the bond that he wished that he and Itachi had as children. But hearing from the elder's own lips that he had essentially faked the love to test his strength. That was a bitter pill to swallow. Finding out and realizing that no way his brother could have killed all his clan alone. That was something he needed to know. He wonders though, somehow Madara Uchiha his ancestor was alive. This was perplexing to say the least. Before Itachi had supposedly died, he had left Sasuke with some serious thoughts. To complete his revenge he must find a way to kill Madara Uchiha. The only being that had answers to that was the nine-tailed fox. So, it seems Konoha was the next place to go. Home, would he be welcomed back with open arms? Or would he be imprisoned? Either way, Konoha is where it began if his brother is right, Konoha is where it will end. It's time to see who is stronger. Him or the dope either way he will have to go all out against the blonde to get his answers. For what he understands from Karen and her intelligence network, neither the blonde nor his tenant will allow that to happen without a price. Whether it is his head or his return, somehow, Sasuke hopes it is for the latter. Curse seal or not, the only thing that had kept him sane was the fact that Naruto kept coming to bring him back. Whether it was by himself or with Sakura and Kakashi, his former teammates and sensei kept coming for him. They wanted him home. Not for who he was, but what he meant to them. Chapter 23. Thoughts were something plentiful in the minds and reasoning of those ninja when it came to Naruto Uzumaki. Or should we say Namikaze? The last holdout concerning Naruto's humanity were beginning to question why the so-called demon was looking more and more like their yondaime than anyone else. Some theorized it was the manipulations of the Kyuubi itself from within Naruto's body. But luckily not only was that squashed by the one remaining Sannin. Kakashi who was summoned about said youth nearly went ballistic himself at the mere idea of it. So unfortunately, Tsunade, after having a discussion with Kakashi as well as other elite ninja of Konoha concerning some of the changes that will have to be done to security. She and Shizune at the next meeting brought forth certificates to show the councilmen and women concerning Naruto's true identity. Needless to say those final holdouts except for the die-hard haters such as Danzu felt guilty about things they had said and done. For on those same slips and papers were not just the names of the third and Tsunade herself. But also announcing the now departed Toad Sannin as the youth's godfather. It would explain to those who were angry back then why Jiraiya did not take the Uchiha boy as his apprentice. Ignorant of the fact that by the time he would have, they would later admit to themselves that the Uchiha had already left by the time Naruto had been chosen. After all family comes before others and to Jiraiya, Naruto was family. He was the son of the yondaime, Jiraiya's first and best student Minato Namikaze. When this was revealed villagers denied it, but Kaharu, one who was one of the final holdouts, had said something that made people in the village look at her in surprise. Especially since it was something that Kakashi had said to her to make her think, if you were the fourth, would you ask anyone to sacrifice their child rather than your own? Villagers who had been intent on leaving and firm in their beliefs that the blonde was the demon stopped at the moment. Some of them having children or grandchildren, the young man's age found themselves immediately thinking of that dreadful night. Ichiraku who ran the raiment stand, one of the few who knew that the child was no demon, reflected on the memory of the yellow flash dashing by him. It was for one moment he could see tears of sadness and remorse as he stops by to look at his stand. Holding up the little baby in his arms, the older man knew that his leader was asking for him to be there for his little boy. What's his name going to be? Naruto Uzumaki. Same went for other villagers who remember the Hokage stopping to see them as they fled the tales of the fox demon. And even those who had known back then that the blonde was not the Kyuubi felt vindicated and turned their anger on their fellow councilman. Sumin Yuzuka, Kiba's mother, was one such person. If the boy had truly been the demon, then several times when her son and he had played together, Akamaru would have said something to raise Kiba's instincts. Not once did the then puppy senses flare. Now was he time for the council and villagers to worry. Their Jinchuriki was the son of their greatest hero. Their vessel whom had racked up enemies of his own had now included several more. After all in the society that they live Ingridges can go on for days if not years. The Uchiha were a perfect example of that. Chapter 24. Naruto found himself in a quandary. He now knows exactly how Konohamaru feels when it comes to his name. Ever since it was revealed to the rest of his fellow shinobi and villagers that he was the yondaime's son. They have been falling all over him to either please him or protect him, an apology. In the beginning it was endearing in a way, now it was just plain irritating. Some of the others were not challenging him to a spar. And those that would, they would not go all out like they used to. Kakashi and Yamato did their best and did, but still. You can only go up against the same person over and over before you get so used to their style of fighting that it actually gets boring. Adi never thought he would hear himself think of sparring as boredom. Fangirl-wise. He thanks the heavens themselves for sending him two of the greatest girls for whom he will be forever grateful. Sakura Haruno and Hinata Hyuga had pretty much saved him from inheriting Sasuke's group. He doesn't know how, but according to Kiba, who was trembling with fear as he witnessed the event, he has not had one incident with a fangirl chasing him for his status as the last Namikaze. Not that he wanted to ask anyway. He has seen that look on Kiba's features plenty of times on his own when his female friends were in a rage. Still, he was at a loss. Deep in thought, Naruto finds himself stopped at the sound of keys and of his teacher and team leader approaching. Kakashi-sensei. Trying to find the right words, Kakashi just gave him a look at the curious gaze in his eyes. Come on Naruto, I got something to show you. Something that I hope will make some of your sparring easier. Easier sparring? About to comment how that seemed like an odd statement in and by itself, Naruto follows immediately as Kakashi leaps to the rooftops. Following the older man around the edges of Konoha, they eventually arrive on the outskirts of the village at a small compound. Despite the silence that greeted him, it was warm and inviting. Kakashi-sensei. This is your home Naruto, this was your parents' house. As this revelation was causing the youth to shake with a mixture of emotions, two spirits who had been watching cry with him. For they feel the longing of their son's desire to know who they were. -888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888. Softly as her husband held her. I know Kushin, I know. Minato said bitterly. A treasured memory of his was when he had first taken that bright blonde boy into his arms. And despite the reasons behind his reason to, and the tears flowing that dreadful night, it was something that had sustained him in his loneliness. Watching as his son follows his former student with a childlike aura about him. One that takes in the wonders of the home, which he had built for not just himself, but for Kushina and that little boy. They watch as each and every room is investigated with wonder. Kakashi beside the blonde, the two spirits could feel the bond that was fragile between their son and his teacher grow stronger. A delightful shriek at the library Minato had built over the years nearly made both spirits go deaf and blind with the happiness in it. All these are mine Kakashi-sensei? They heard Naruto ask. Yes, all these were your father's Naruto. Kakashi chuckled. This is every single jutsu he knew and then some. Like father like son, Kushina giggled, her tears going away a little bit. Minato giving a sheepish grin as the delight of his son had even infected him. All those jutsus were things that he had intended on training Naruto in himself if given the chance. They return in full force though, and even he starts crying as Naruto stumbles across the nursery or what would have been his room. Covered in layers of dust, it was hard not to see the toys placed there for eager little hands. It was hard not to see the crib ready for a baby that would never know the feel of it. They loved me didn't they, Naruto whispered so softly. Not able to really respond, Kakashi just strode over and took the young blonde in his arms. Expecting to be refused because of recent events, the older ninja is surprised as the arms wrap around his waist and the tears fall. I had a family that loved me. Chapter 25. Sasuke found himself thinking. Set in his path as he was, he figured it out that somehow, everything that was currently happening revolved around someone from his childhood. Mainly a certain blonde Jinchuriki. Thanks to wandering merchants, Sasuke begins to wonder why. Why were those he left behind stronger than ever? Why were they strong enough to face the Akatsuki and win? Rumors have finally reached him about his former teammates and friends, thanks to the intricate spy network set up by Karen. The dark-haired woman may be trying his patience to the point of a desire of death upon his part. But she was proving useful. According to her sources, Sakura and supposedly an elderly ninja from Suna were responsible for the death of Sasori from the Akatsuki. Shikamaru, the only other genius from his class, was the recently rumored to have taken out Haiden. And the blondest best friend from his youth boy who was the dead last in his class. Supposedly responsible for the disappearance of Dodara alongside the permanent removal of Kakuzu, Haiden's partner was the weak one according to many. Even knowing what is inside of the blonde, Sasuke reflects and grows angry. He who was alone responsible for the demise of Orochimaru. It paled in comparison to the blonde and the fact that he has had more contact with his brother's group than he has. Which leads him to the other issue at hand. Madara, his mind drifting to the thoughts of the great Biju within Naruto's body, he begins to think of the connection between it and his ancestors. Something is there and it is only something that the Kyuubi could answer. Pausing on top of a tree with Karen and the others beside him, Sasuke makes no sound. Instead he simply sees familiar buildings off in the distance. The shadows of carved faces within a great mountain. Man, do we really have to come here, Sasuke? Sujetsu asks with a mixture of disgust and irritation. Karen glaring at him for interrupting her time with Sasuke. She aimed a well-placed fist and struck hard. The white-haired youth glaring at her for a moment, he just smirks. What's the matter, Karen? Afraid that you might lose Sasuke to some girl who isn't as butch as you? Leaping at him, it was with pure luck that Yuugo, at a simple nod of Sasuke's head, caught the woman in midair. The anger on her features evident, she struggled from the sheer strength of his grip. It was at that moment which several men and women landed around him. Sasuke Uchiha, you and your companions will come with us. The Godin will be much interested in seeing you. Chapter 26. Tsunade had a headache. And that headache bore the name of one Sasuke Uchiha. He had returned, and luckily, the Anbu who had discovered his presence along with that of 3 others were smart enough to keep it from reaching a certain pair of individuals. Namely Sakura and Naruto. Her apprentice, she could handle somewhat. Over the years of training, the stoic fangirl had grown, and although she still crushed over the Uchiha youth, she knew that not only he had changed. So had she was not going to fawn over him as she used to. But it was Naruto that she was worried about. It was Naruto who might do something drastic because looking at the sullen youth in front of her. Well, needless to say, that is why she was calling the Jounin leader from Team Kakashi. The whirl of smoke appears, and Tsunade finds Kakashi studying the Uchiha with a narrow gaze. Kakashi, you're here, good. Knowing he means no disrespect at the words he utters now, Tsunade makes a mental note to reprimand him later. But Pravadlish agrees with his question. Why are you here, Sasuke? HN. For once not taking that as an answer to his question, Kakashi grew angry. Never one to show emotions, for once there was 2 people who did not deserve this kind of attitude from their once childhood friend. Reaching forth in mere seconds, Kakashi grabs the youngest of the missing Uchihas by the throat. Then the ninja smiles as he reveals an eye that still brings nightmares to the young man. Manjikyu. The Pinwheel lie in Sasuke's nightmare come to life. Now he was going to experience it again. Chapter 27. Everyone within the offices of the Godin of Konoha were quiet and at a standstill. Even Juugo, whom without Sasuke's control to a degree was silent. Karen was actually silent, as Sujetsu was watching with a look of glee on his features. Those from Konoha were a mixture of emotions though. Some agreed with Kakashi and his tactics. Those like Tsunade and Shizune were actually applauding him because for far too long the Uchiha, any Uchiha, had been babied. And some were half and half because they still couldn't let their past feelings subside yet. But yet they did nothing. Then there were those who wanted to stop it right away. Despite the knowledge that Naruto was the Yondame's son, they still thought that Sasuke was unwilling to betray them and everything. That those surrounding him were to further his compliance. Never seeing the fact that he was the leader. But they did agree on one thing. That the path of an avenger. It leads to nothing but heartache. Look at what they had done to Naruto. Although they now realized that he was in control and not the Kyuubi, they had years of malice and hatred to make up. And although he said it was all right and that he had long since forgiven them, many still felt guilty of things that they had done. Their hearts hurt that the blonde youth would not allow them to earn or even beg his forgiveness. Even if he had claimed that he had long since done that, to their pride, they had not. Now as the Uchiha is released from the chokehold, they watched and listened. You are lucky, Uchiha, Kakashi worded coldly. The coolness in his former sensei's gaze unnerved the dark-haired youth to a degree. Although he did not show it, he couldn't help but wonder how. How could his former teacher, one who is not even an Uchiha, achieve the eye? Whoa, did you kill? No one. The copy nin replied. I killed no one. Sasuke came online all by itself. The older man worded coldly. Something called hard work over the years. Growling in anger now, as well as hatred, Sasuke is about to leap up and at the older man in anger. Figuring that his one sensei was lying, what happened next was unexpected. Especially as a bright orange flash stopped him cold. Team. Dark Sharingan eyes met bright blue tinged with red. A growl from the blonde youth before him, the others back up out of fear. The intent off of both young men strong and nearly thick with a mixture of malice and pain. It all begins now. History is about to repeat. Like the first and the second had done years ago, 2 brothers, albeit in spirit, are about to fight it out. The question is this. Can it be stopped? Chapter 28. The first sign of a fight happened before anyone else in the room could blink. Naruto had swiftly but surely tossed Sasuke through one of the many windows in the Hokage office. Those watching only were able to see as Naruto leapt out the window after him. Many rushing to stop it, some are prevented by both Kakashi and Karen. Those on both sides surprised by this action, it is only further enforced as despite the animosity between them, Kakashi nods his head as the woman gestures for Juugo to step forward. Although innocent and almost childlike in nature, the fact that he was the source of the curse seal, as Karen tells them, makes them wary and guarded. Kakashi, what the hell do you think you are doing? Tsunade almost shrieked as moments later her own apprentice ran through and leapt out the window after those that were fighting. He is allowing them to fight. Even I could see it was going to happen. The red-headed woman responded. Her own intelligence high enough to rival Sasuke and possibly even Shikamaru, the woman just stated it with such arrogance about her that admittedly Tsunade was hard-pressed not to hit her. As much as I want to disagree with her, Tsunade-sama, she is right. Kakashi said reluctantly. This time I don't think it can be stopped. Now if you can excuse me, I have to go stop Sakura before she gets herself killed. But the whirl of smoke, Kakashi himself is gone, leaving Tsunade and her Anbu with Team Hibi. Both sides looking at one another, it is only Juugo who stops them from chasing after the four. But as Tsunade stares at the red-headed woman, she understands now what she had meant. Back away, Aim, back away. Reluctantly, the Anbu move back and with a single look Karen gestures for Juugo to stand down. The silence still paramounted is Sujetsu, who breaks the tension with his silence. Man, I need to fight something. Hey Blondie, think you could get someone to fight me? Butch over there can't spar with me worth a damn. Might hurt her so-called girlish figure. Much to the amusement of those in the room save Juugo, the red-headed woman leaps for the man with the sword behind her. Stepping away to avoid the confrontation, it is Juugo who once more catches the wild woman with one hand. As the Anbu watch the struggle between the three members of Hibi still with them, Tsunade as well as Shizune pull out the Hokage ball. To watch what is sure to be heartbreaking. Team 7 has been reunited again. -8888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888áf 3rd Yondaime, and one of the last Uchihas fights it out. Not knowing whom to really cheer for, they all more or less at some time or another had tried to break it up. But in doing so, many were hurt for as they learned. Neither youth was pulling back their punches. Eventually Shinobi left and right realized something and prevented those that they could from interfering in the fight. Shinobi of all ranks moved ahead in Konoha asking villagers to evacuate. Those who were already hurt, it was by luck that Sakura, despite her desire to stop the fight, was a medic nin and Tsunade's apprentice. The young woman was already barking orders and healing those that were worse for wear to the point of health that they could be transferred to the hospital. It was then that Kakashi had run into her. Kakashi-sensei. You have to go. You have to stop Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun. No, I can't at this time, Sakura. The silver-haired ninja worded quietly. His one eye looking toward the flitting figures of light and dark. It has been bugging me recently why they had bonded the way that they had way back then. And if I had known what I know now. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura, think about all the fights that Naruto and Sasuke had in the past. Think about them in comparison to before they were teammates. What did you see? Confused at her former teacher's words, others of the Rookie 9 who was around and helping with the injured began to think. The same goes for the villagers who even now can hear the screams and the insults being traded back and forth above them by the two strongest ninja of their village. In the end, it was Ino who spoke up. All my life I can remember Sasuke never really saying a word. Even if you were to talk to him, he would say as little as possible. The only person to even get him to say a sentence or to even get him to react was Naruto. Kiba finished as he and Akamaru were gently placing someone on a stretcher behind the giant hound. Ino's right. Yeah, she is. How troublesome. Replied Shikamaru. Now that I think about it as well, Sasuke became like that after what happened to his clan and with all the pity being thrown at him by the villagers and council. He withdrew even further from us all. Sakura whispered. My god, Naruto. He was doing what none of us could after the massacre of Sasuke's family. Yesh was healing Sasuke. Kakashi said quietly. He didn't give pity, he didn't fawn. Naruto remained simply whom he was. Someone who knew what it was like to be alone and who would not let Sasuke be alone no matter what. Even if Sasuke desired it, he would be there to annoy, to irritate, to be a friend and brother where there was none. Then this fight was fated. Neji stated simply. He and many of the Hyuga using their Byakugan to detect anyone trapped in the rubble of the fight. Bonds like that are never destroyed, for to do so would be to lose a part of who we are. Chapter 29. Unaware while at the same time aware of their surroundings, it did not stop either young man from fighting hard or fast. If they had heard what Neji had said, both would have agreed. This fight was long in coming. At the Valley of the End, it was true that they fought hard then. But that was more or less under pressure of Orochimaru and of Konoha pressing down on both of their backs. The fight wasn't the true fight that both wanted. A fight that wasn't about something, but a fight about everything. A better way to explain it is to look at it from both sides of the two fighters. For Sasuke, it was not about Itachi. It was not about Orochimaru. It was simply a need. A need to see who was stronger. He, the supposed best of his class, was surpassed several times by the blonde in front of him before he had left. Even at the Valley of the End, when he had pulled back his punch, seeing the scratch that the dope had put in his headband had left the dark-haired youth unsettled for years because he was supposed to protect Naruto. To Naruto it was simply about one thing alone. It was no longer about the promise he made to Sakura. It was simply to prove to Sasuke that the bonds between them were not broken. That to Naruto the dark-haired youth would always be his brother, regardless of blood and events, a brother that needs to come home. So the fight was fated to happen. Team. Howled a blonde emitting sparks of blue and red chakra. The young man battling the other lets out a series of water jutsus to combat the fireball just thrown towards him. The two attacks meeting, a great ball of smoke erupts in the air. Sasuke, believing it is his chance, activates the Sharingan at that moment in the confusion. His hands having reached to the blonde in the cover of the smoke, he soon found himself within the seal inside the blonde's mind. Face to face with the legendary lord of the Biju. I will be the nine-tailed fox. So we meet again, mighty Uchiha. One with the eyes of Madara. Chapter 30. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as the fox chuckled malevolently. Its red eyes focused clearly on him. The youth finds himself pulled out abruptly only moments later by not only the fox's shove, but by the angry blue chakra that could only belong to Naruto. Team. Growls the blonde, his eyes were slits, and that violent shade of red that he knows all too well from his nightmares. The memories of that strange red cloak that surrounded Naruto that day were intensely strong still. Although he knew of it to be the fox demon within blonde's body at this moment, did not matter. Dope. Stay away from that damn bastard fox. Your fight is with me. Naruto screamed as he swept the Uchiha's legs out from under him. Sharingan or not, Naruto was actually on par with Sasuke, which was surprising to say the least. Never before had any Uchiha, as he and others watching from above, been able to stand toe-to-toe with anyone in a fight save one person, Minato Namikaze. From his time in Konoha, he had read up on any and all history on how to thwart the Manjutsu Sharingan. The only person to ever fully defeat the Sharingan other than the green beasts of Konoha in a spar was the legendary Yellow Flash. Unlike Mido Guy and Rock Lee, the Yandame's speed was instantaneous. You could see the wind move and pick up the strength given enough practice of the other two men, and eventually see them with time. But with the Yellow Flash, he would be on you before you blinked according to the records. And Naruto somehow at this moment was surpassing the green beasts and rapidly becoming like the Yandame. Someone whose speed and power can rank right up there with the greatest of cages. That's when it hit him. For a brief second during their fight, he had seen images of the fourth in the corner of his eye from Hokage Mountain. An image that now looks identical to his childhood friend. That man Daba's your father, isn't he? Knowing immediately who the Uchiha was referring to, all the dark-haired youth got in response was a feral grin, as not only was Naruto holding a different kind of kunai, but it was the fact that as Naruto threw it and proceeded to disappear in a reddish-blue light, well, that just stepped the whole fight in a new direction. One that for once the Uchiha was proud to be a part of it. Hariishin. Chapter 31. Blue flashes sparked the night sky much the same way a yellow one did years ago. Those underneath watching, those last holdouts, and those people who fought despite evidence against whom the blonde youth was were convinced. Naruto was indeed the Yandame's son. Kakashi, watching the events overhead, had never been more proud of the blonde youth. But it was not him that we should hear speak of the events transpiring. It is to those who have gone before that we go to now. Minato was watching alongside his wife and the spirit of another couple. Ones who hope that Naruto succeeds in redeeming their youngest child from the damnation that their other son has put him in. Yugaku and Makoto Uchiha had pleaded for their son's path to be changed. When they had arrived all those years ago in the heavens, they saw that their sons would never join them. The Shinigami had told them, simply stated, their clan's arrogance had doomed their family to damnation. But that there was a chance for their youngest, Sasuke, could still be saved. And that only one youth could save their son. Only one youth could turn his path around. Watching over Sasuke as they did, they immediately knew of whom that he was speaking of. The blonde demon vessel. At first the Shinigami had to restrain Minato from killing the Uchiha Lord over and over again, for the sake of the sanity of the women in their lives. It was just some of the comments that had been made had been too much. But as the Uchihas watched away from the Namikaze, Makoto began to see what the god meant. Naruto understood Sasuke. Despite the situations that her son and the blonde boy had endured, the feelings were the same. Things beyond their control had taken the family that loved them from both, but unlike their son, Naruto did not let the bad feelings overwhelm him. Although the treatment that she and her husband themselves at some point delivered bothers her now, she sees what the boy was truly like. He was not the fox, nor was he the monster she and the other people of Konoha were. But unlike the others, the doctors and those who meant well, none could bring her son out from the cold darkness he was pushing himself into. It took a boy who harassed him, who constantly called him a tomato, bring her son out and into the light. And now he was the only one who could save him. Naruto, believe in you. Makoto whispered alongside her husband and several Uchiha ancestors. Save our son. -88888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888. Flashes of blue flit the air around the dark-haired youth. The villagers who had been the final holdouts against the Jinchuriki's true identity now realized that the only way the young man could have learned that particular skill was if he had been the son of their greatest hero. Kakashi, who had been watching, couldn't help but be proud of the youth as he watched. It has only been about 3 weeks since Naruto had moved into his parents' home. And in those 3 weeks Naruto had found his father's notes. Sealed so that only he or Kakashi could view them. The older man had been startled to see the note left at the top from his long-departed sensei. Kakashi, if you are reading this, then I have been dead for some time. The Shinigami having taken my soul in exchange for sealing the fox within my son who has only just been born. My son will need you now as he grows, for despite my words to the third, I know I speak from hope. But hearing of the fear already from Suna over the one-tailed Ataki, think my son will suffer despite everything. Help him, teach him to grotto for him what I wish I could be there for. Become his father, like I was for you. Minato, he had done what he could. He admitted his mistakes in a conversation with a blonde which he shall take to his grave. In doing so a lot of which had needed to be aired on both sides had been done. And with word, each anger and resentment released, the blonde youth and his former teacher had formed a bond which cannot be broken now. It is why Kakashi understood that this fight above him was something that only Naruto could do. To help him prepare, Kakashi and 100 of Naruto's clones work day and night so that he can learn his father's greatest jutsu. The only thing that could moves faster than the Sharingan in any form was now the only thing that could help him bringing back one who should be home and not on a trip of vengeance. The blue lights becoming stronger as the flash by, he can see the faint twitches of red appearing. The Kyuubi manifesting its presence, the copy ninja, remembers those words for a brief moment shared to him from the great demon lord. The flesh bag cares a lot for you, one eye, don't fuck it up and let us die. There are those who watch even now who have a vested interest in that we live. Those words puzzle him still, but he watches. The lights still flashing as they have done before, it is done shortly as the battle finishes. With one last bright flash of blue, Naruto lands before him. Sasuke cradled in his arms, the youth's body black and blue but not broken, his own figure the worse for wear. Kakashi takes Sasuke, allowing Sakura who had just arrived to catch an exhausted Naruto in her own arms. Sakura looks up at him at that moment, she too having watched the flashing blue lights that she somehow knew was Naruto. Their mutual sensei cradling Sasuke, they start the trek towards the hospital. Villagers and shinobi alike parting the way, aiding their path to ease their two precious burdens. The shared image of the man with the three teens was enough to put a smile on their lips. The words of the Hyuga flowing through each of their minds as they listened to the pink-haired medic Nin. Kakashi sensei, is it over? Do you think it's over between them? Smiling down at the two clenched hands of the blonde and dark-haired youth, bound tightly as if neither wanting to let the other go. It's a very believe Sasuke is home now for good. Chapter 32. 2 weeks later, much to the surprise of the villagers and shinobi, both Sasuke and Naruto during that immense fight had qualified themselves to be in the hospital for a while. Tsunade, Sakura and Karen looking after all three of them, it was slowly during this period that, albeit reluctantly at first, Team Hebe started becoming integrated with the villagers. Karen had found herself becoming part of the medical staff as well as working alongside the Nara clan to find help for Juugo. When under control of either herself or Sasuke, the giant was gentle and the kids at the academy adored him. So using the extensive library of the Nara, they hoped to find a way for Juugo to function like a normal man. Sujetsu had found himself a lady he could actually see himself marrying in time. Anko Mitarashi was just as crazy as he was when it came to fighting, always itching for it, and he was happy to oblige. When he started the same tricks and insults on her when they had met, the former snake apprentice had proceeded to calmly and forcefully work at beating the shit out of him. And he found himself actually enjoying the barbs she shot back out at him for each insult. It was a match made in heaven. But it is to Naruto and Sasuke that we go to now as they remain in the hospital. Both in a coma of sorts, neither one since Kakashi and Sakura had brought them there had let go of the other. Their hands grasped together only grew tighter with each attempt to separate them. In fact, chakra from both would flare up and attack. Now Thano both were awakening. -888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888888. pouring in. Focusing on his hand for a moment, he starts to pull on it for but a moment. Oblit go first. Startled by the sound of the long-missed voice, Naruto turned his head rapidly to the side. Wincing as bouts of pain shoot through his body to find the same pain-filled gaze of a dear friend. Team HN, you really should let me go now, I won't leave Naruto. Sasuke said quietly. His dark eyes reflecting various emotions as he looks away. Somehow, Naruto knows he speaks the truth. Releasing his missing teammate's hand, he is shocked by the next word spoken. But why? Why me of all people, Naruto? Only 2 words were said in response to that question. 2 words that even though they were small and did not say much, spoke volumes. Why not? HN dope team, the bickering that they were known for as children starting up again once more. It is upon that scene that Sakura and Kakashi come in upon. Out of habit almost, even if it was something that she had not done in years, Sakura stepped between them and not only let Naruto have it with a slap upside the head. Much to the surprise of those around her, she proceeded to do the same to the Uchiha, who rubs the back of his head in shock and not to mention in awe of the now pounding headache. Does it always feel like this? Pretty much, Naruto whimpered out as his own hands start to glow green. It got to the point that Bachan taught me some minor jutsus to take the edge off. Think she would teach me? That earned another whack from the irate pink-haired ninja, much to the amusement of their former sensei. Sighing at what he must be doing, he allows the Anbu entrance in to plant themselves in the room with the two young men inside. More specifically around Sasuke. "Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asks in shock. Sakura, looking away out of sadness, cannot answer and just runs to another room. Upset and angry. "It's not by choice that I do this, Naruto," the older man said quietly. "The fact of the matter is, the council after your fight with Sasuke weeks ago is now more convinced than ever that you are Minato-sensei's son. The villagers have demanded to protect their hero's legacy, even if it is from an Uchiha." Chapter 33. Naruto was startled as the Anbu surrounded Sasuke's bed. Struggling to get up, Naruto fights back against Kakashi, who was trying to prevent him from aggravating muscles that indeed felt stiff and sore. "Naruto, didn't you have been out for a while?" "I'm fine, Kakashi-sensei. Where is that damn council? I am not going to let them do this. Not after all that we went through. I will take you to them later. Now stay down." Never one to express his emotions, those single 3 words threw not only the Anbu for a loop but startled both patients in the room. Naruto, at the tone of order in Kakashi's voice, for the first time in recorded history, actually obeyed in something that had nothing to do with learning a jutsu. "Kakashi-sensei. Look, Naruto, the council knows how much Sasuke means to you. Sakura and I fought with them about it and explained everything. But they are firm in their stance. We did manage to get him a few concessions though." "Which are?" the Uchiha asked from his end. He had been surprised that his former teammates had jumped to his defense as he had listened to their words. His dark eyes were studying the solitary figure that was once his sensei, whom had whipped out a little green book with an unfamiliar title and yet familiar perverted cover. "Starters, you will not be going back to the Uchiha district," Kakashi worded quietly. "You will be staying with Naruto and myself in the Namikaze residence." Something akin to gratefulness flashes momentarily across the eyes of the Uchiha, and Kakashi smiled at the glance that even the blonde had given him. It was one of pure adoration, one that he had started to become accustomed to since their talk that day weeks ago. The talk that had helped him grieve as well as Naruto for those that had gone on before. "Why not in my clan home?" Sasuke asked. Not that he minded staying with the dope as well as former teacher. It was the answer that Kakashi had given him, which surprised him greatly. "Because although we know better now, Sasuke, the council does not." "I see you do not blame them," the Uchiha said quietly. Naruto, on the other hand, yelps in anger. "Sasuke isn't going anywhere, Kakashi-sensei. He knows now. He knows." "Naruto, damn it, Kakashi-sensei. I trust him as do you and Sakura. Doesn't that account for anything?" Sasuke spoke quietly. Catching the immediate turn of the blonde in the best next to him. "I understand. But Sasuke, I understand, Naruto, look at what I have done to you and to the others. I cannot blame them." "Sasuke, look, dope, I understand. It's just depending on what happens I have to earn their trust back." An angered look passes over the blonde's features rapidly. Not liking Sasuke's words. But not able to argue against them either, he instead simply turns to Kakashi with a regretful look. "You said concessions, what are the others?" "Anbu guards for at least the next 6 months are to be stationed with you at all times, for both of you. Albeit for different reasons, for Sasuke, it is how he said." The gray-haired man said quietly. "Even though you have returned, recent revelations into Naruto's identity have made them a little overprotective of him somewhat," Kakashi stated before interrupted by a little cough of bullshit coming from said blonde. "But you said for both of us," Naruto worded cautiously as the older man glared at him for the interruption. "And don't you dare, you would not feel the way I do about them. I mean, look at how they have treated me before." "That is true, Naruto," Kakashi replied, and in such a way that somehow Naruto was getting the feeling that what Kakashi would say next was not going to like. "With Akatsuki coming, you can no longer do missions and to simply train with me and the other jounin to hone your skills. You are to also have Anbu with you at all times." "What?" Chapter 34. 3 days later, to say that a certain blonde Namikaze youth was already chafing under these new restrictions would be an understatement. Naruto was downright pissed. It was only with the presence of the copycat ninja and one Sasuke Uchiha that kept him from going off the deep end. The former training him, the other despite being in a wheelchair at the moment healing, bickering with him every so often to keep the youth on his guard. Sakura just cracking up every so often as with the occasional insult thrown out by the dark-haired youth hits home with the blonde. She was simply biding her time and waiting. Sooner or later those two were going to get around to sparring and she was going to have to be there to heal them both. As well as knock them silly, but it would be just like old times. Times that are long missed. When Naruto had pleaded his case with the council, even Tsunade, no matter how much she argued, she found herself outvoted as she stated that restraining the blonde within Konoha was the wrong idea. That this maneuver would only bring the Akatsuki towards the Monmas to get at the youth. It fell on deaf ears as the council members remained stubborn and unyielding. Especially as rumors began to spread all across the shinobi nations as word of Naruto's identity began to hit. The son of the Yellow Flash lives, and not only that, he was the container for the lord of all the Biju. the nine-tailed fox. Already Anbu and the patrols have had to stop and kill several rock ninja who had attempted to infiltrate their city. All in attempts to get at the legacy of the one and only man to have beaten them into submission. The one whom had already been nicknamed the Blue Thunder by his own people. Even Kyuubi, whom despite his hatred of humanity was ticked at the council on behalf of his jailer. For at least while the flesh bag in his opinion was moving, he could count on seeing some bloodshed spilled around the boy. Things were essentially on pins and needles around the last of the Uzumaki Namikaze clans. There was the upside though to it. Or at least in the opinion of the fox, who was of like minds with the copy ninja and the long-departed Toad Sage. Hinata Hyuga was starting to come forth a little more in interest of Naruto. With aid from the flirtatious Ino and savvy Sakura, the young woman was ridding herself of that shyness, much to Hiyashi's delight. Not only with their friendship has she grown stronger for her clan and her team, Hinata was coming out of her shell apparently. Just the other day as a councilman was insisting on refusing to acknowledge the fact that things were changing. Hiyashi, who had brought her along so she may learn how it works, was stunned to find the young woman speak up. And with wisdom so much like hers and Hanabi's dear departed mother. Things have changed, Councilman Takashi. You are so wrapped up in the past to realize the past itself has changed. Yes, Orochimaru was once a Sannin of Konoha. But he changed and instead of becoming a hero, he became its want-to-be death. We have factions of our own Anbu forces according to my father. Simply because one man believes we should become emotionless. Yet one of our strongest ninjas is one who draws from them in his loyalty and his love for our village, despite all that had been done to him in the past. We are changing, Takahashi-san. It is just you refuse to see it. Never before had Hiyashi been as proud of Hinata as he had at that very moment. And considering whom Naruto was and what he knew of Minato. It would indeed be a boon to get to know the youth whom was responsible for saving much discord among his clan members of the main and branch houses. And for healing the own discord within his family, so it was to the point that he was arranging, albeit by pulling a few strings. That the other clan heads to allow the youth to not only return to missions, but to also become a member of the council. As the last of the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans, he had every right to be there, and he had every right to be able to work to protect their shared home. Besides, if Naruto could come onto the council as the representative for his parents Kushina and Minato, just maybe he can finally help Tsunade in achieving something that he himself desires. Getting rid of Dan's and his two wannabe lackeys despite their firm understanding of whom Naruto was. The third's own former teammates Homura and Kaharu III had been in power for far too long, and what they have been doing according to his people within their camps. Can and will constitute treason. Chapter 35. While strings were being pulled down below, for a variety of reasons, the Shinigami was smiling as he spoke to another of his subordinates. His face shifting through a variety of emotions, ranging from pleasure to anger, and then understanding, he sent the being away to gaze at the two sets of parents studying the living world below him. If they only knew what was going to happen, he would be sure they would both be proud. Both families had been on pins and needles watching the fight between the only living reminders left of their past. Itachi was now indeed dead, for he himself was summoned by his minions, who were having a most difficult time taking the youth's soul to its destination. The older of the two in denial that his brother had succeeded, he was determined that he was still trapped in Genjutsu of Sasuke's design. The Shinigami had no trouble disillusioning him of that belief when he not only showed the youth his dead body, but proceeded to drop him in the middle of hell itself. Giving instructions to the one in charge named Lucifer that Itachi would be his personal little toy. The god was pleased, for as he started to leave, he could already hear the youth beginning to scream. Despite being whom he was, he did not have the heart to tell those that he was here, and unlike most of his family, would be along with one other, the only two of their clan to be tortured for eternity. When it comes to the ninjas of this land, the Shinigami had to test them more for morals than deeds. Because they do kill for pay, those like Itachi were obvious and destined for hell. But Kakashi Haddock would be a thoughtful process in and all on its own. Some of the things he has done would merit a position in the fires of Hades, but yet the way he treasures his friends and those whom he considers family, like his 3 students. He also fights to keep things whole and the same, so that those whom are away have something to come home to. To the death god, that is a man deserving of the fields of heaven. All in all, though Kakashi was the catalyst to this world's fate. Not the blonder his friend but Kakashi. It would be through his attention to those boys, which would determine how they grow. Already he had made great strides that should he live, the Jinchuriki will eventually start calling him dad without thinking about it. As for the Uchiha boy, it is to be the same. All 3 are alone. All 3 have something the other 2 needs to be complete. For Naruto is the sense of family. He knows he has been accepted in Konoha as someone whom is simply a jailer thanks to recent events, but he has never known the real meaning of family. His leader became his father, his best friends would become siblings. The Sasuke, it was the sense of knowing you are not alone. Naruto understands him more than anything, and like Naruto, he had begun to think of the copy ninja as a father. A man though for unlike Fugaku, would be there for him and offering words of pride and solace when he needs it. But to Kakashi, it would be both, for not only would he receive the sense of having a family, having been an orphan much like both boys. He would also know that he was not alone. And to not be alone is something that the Shinigami knows all life needs. He was the true connection between the two boys who would be the heroes of the Shinobis. Already, even with the loss of Itachi, their enemies the Akatsuki begin to move. Having all but the Kyuubi within their grasp, they were biding their time to wait and gather Naruto when he was weak. Minato was already chomping at the bits to be allowed to save his son from such a fate that those ninja intended for him. But the death god had simply shaken his head. That is no longer your job. You see, it was a job which belonged to two other men. Sasuke and Kakashi, they were the only two on this world who had the capability to break through the hold that the Kyuubi can have on him. The incident at the bridge should remind them of that much once they tell the Uchiha of those events. Naruto did not hear Sakura screaming, was begging him to come back to them. But because of the Sharingan that both have, he will be able to hear them. Only those two could keep Naruto from that fate. Sakura was the one destined to heal their bodies. They would be the ones to heal each other's souls. Chapter 36. Naruto was startled as Hiashi Hyuga approached him. Some councilmen, still feeling guilty for the hell he had been put through as a child, had asked him to tell the youth of his position as a representative for both his mother and father's clans in the council. Considering he was the last of both, the young man had honestly no clue that he had any power on the council, nevertheless to be a part of it. Realizing though that he could not be Hokage and a councilman at the same time, this is where Hiashi couldn't help but laugh as the young man turned to one of the few adults he trusted. Iruka, despite being a teacher, was proud to act as a clan head for Naruto's family, of sorts, until the blonde's own children were able to take over. The brown-haired Chunin, surprised that he of all people was asked and not Kakashi. The youth had to look at him pointedly and remind the older man about the copy nin's tendency to being late. And that with his luck, all the important things he might believe in could be thwarted with ease. He understood right that minute, therefore they waited and listened and trusted in those like Iruka to help them understand the blonde youth and what he believes in. And in doing so they learned to be the kind of people which their parents and their idols would like very much. And the same goes for the older ninjas as well. Naruto's clan joining the council in a way would go towards gathering more to Hiashi, who was a good man and knew things were changing in Konoha with Iruka's help. Kurenai, who despite never really being married to Asuma, was the acting head for the Sarutobi clan until Konohamaru was ready to take over. The no supporter of the blonde, the woman and the little boy were being denied their rightful spots that the third and then his son had held. When Iruka had arrived at the meeting to determine Kurenai's position, Hiashi was smiling as some of the councilmen who were often against him winced loud and clear. Those like Takahashi as well as Danzo often teamed together, forming enough of a block to prevent him from doing much of anything to make Konoha better. And it was well known fact that a lot of the things that Hiashi had been trying to do, Iruka and Kurenai both heartily agreed with, for although he could not readily do anything, they knew most of the ninjas that had done their best to watch over Naruto as a child. Those that Iruka had witnessed time and time again rescue the little boy were all Hyuga. The Hyuga with their Byakugan could readily tell that although Naruto had the seal within him, that the little boy's own chakra was blue and not the malevolent red of the Kyubis unless antagonized. The fact that they could not speak up about it had hurt them greatly, for although there were many like Hiashi in the clan who could see that, there were some who refused, and those were the men and women on their own clan council. All still grieving for the deaths of loved ones lost to the fox. They refused to believe even what their own eyes told them and had often prevented Hiashi from allowing what they had discovered from being told. But the death of some over the years since the events of that dreadful night, as clan head, Hiashi had slowly been able to replace more and more of them with those who had seen and believed. Hiashi now had a very powerful ally in the young Chunin. For now that the true nature of the seal had been released and the observations of the Hyuga known, to harm Iruka Yamino in any way would guarantee bringing the Kyuubi out. Because as many know, the blonde would always want to protect and avenge his most precious people, and the teacher was definitely on that list. All of the rookie 9 and their senseis believed in what the blonde was capable of. Many times he had been sent on missions by this so-called council in hopes he would be killed. Each time he had returned and in doing so had also brought with him a powerful new ally. Naruto saved them from Gaara and in doing so not only reached and brought back the humanity and the sand ninja. When the youth became Kazekage, he willingly became an ally of Konoha with his people. Snow, Waterfall, all sorts of people whom Team 7 had met in their journeys had become an ally to their village. With Iruka there as well as Kurenai, it began to tip the balance in favor of reforms. Already with war forthcoming, the academy was stepping up in their training of the students. Now thanks to changes that Iruka had discussed with Naruto concerning some ideas he had. The meeting that they were having today would be to discuss chakra tests to gauge the precise amount a person had. Naruto and Kabuto both being prime examples of those whose control or sheer amount far outlasted their peers in the academy. It had led Naruto, who had wondered if there were other young children as well as men and women who had been rejected or even failed their genin exams to the point that they had quit. This was something that could be accomplished with the aid of the Hyuga, who were more than willing to use the Byakugan to test out this theory, and what they had found was astonishing. There were indeed several young men and women who had failed to pass the tests whose control was phenomenal. But yet whose chakra reserves were low. No one though noticed and no one bothered, and with the fact that Tsunade needed medics where control was desperately needed. AM of the Raiment stand, for example, once again found herself being drafted to aid in the healing of the injured. The other though was far less, but they had discovered that although nowhere near Naruto's level of chakra, that two 12-year-old boys and one 10-year-old girl whom were still in the academy had the exact same problems that Naruto had. A simple bunchen was far out of their reach, and yet when they attempted the cage, each one of them produced 3 or more with relative ease. Ironically, all 3 were from the same clan, a clan which had rejected Naruto and to who the blonde had not known were his family, for they had changed their name to escape their former village's destruction. Councilman Takahashi, and of the ones who vehemently wanted to stick to traditions despite the secrets he knew and kept. He was forced in order to keep his own children from being killed by a certain councilman of the village to hate and to change his name. And it was despite his desires to protect a little boy whom desperately needed him and whom was slowly growing jealous of this man whom had usurped his place in the blonde's life, along with others that was rightfully his and his family. You see, Takahashi was Kushina Uzumaki's younger brother. Hence Naruto's blood uncle. Chapter 37. Moroku Takahashi watched from his home as a nephew he wishes he could show his pride in goes off to train with the one who has become his parent in all but blood. Followed by 2 dark-haired youth and a pink-haired girl, he knew that this was simply a session to help the blonde calm down. One of the youths healed enough to be able to spar since his return a month ago. The villagers were getting used to the occasion explosions released into the air. It was better to have a happy Namikaze and Uchiha rather than a ticked-off one. Fighting was the only way that issues got settled between them, and not only that, it made life interesting to say the least. To a degree it had made him smile. For despite looking like his father, there was a lot in the boy that reminded him of his sister. His attitude, his temper, his ability to change the darkest of enemies into comrades that came from his sister. No one was able to resist her charm. Her warmth was so vivacious that any and all who met her couldn't help but be drawn. Husband, turning around to see his beloved wife Aika beside him, the older man holds her to him tightly. She was someone whom he had to protect, for much like the Hyuga has a seal upon her. One that is an ex-member of Root. Well, you get the idea. Following his sister, when news of her marrying the yondaime of Konoha had reached him, Moroku on his way to her had stumbled across Aika's motionless form. To hurt to be moved very far, he had found a cave and took care of her there. Several times she had just looked at him clueless, for unlike many she knew and grew up with, he had no real access to chakra as she did. So her healing was slow and quite painful for months. During this time, the young woman slowly began to gain back her strength at the tender care of the man beside her. And while they were getting along and together, they were falling in love. Finally able to move, the two had made their way back towards Konoha after nearly 5.5 months in the wilderness. Almost a full 9 months after he had intended to arrive. Then he had met with his sister, who was at that moment quite pregnant with her first baby. She was so happy to see him and have him meet her husband, who welcomed him with open arms. Minato, being the orphan that he was glad that Moroku had found his way to Konoha. Glad that his son could have even more family in which to be a part of. 3 days later, the Kyuubi attacked. Husband Aika worded softly as once again he turns towards the disappearing figure of the blonde boy and then walks away sad and dejected. To free her, after what had happened so long ago, Anzo had forced him to give up his name and any rights he had to his nephew. So that Aika would not have to endure in that hell ever again. And because of the seal, if he was to ever get near or even try to save his nephew from what the villagers have been doing to him, the seal would become active and Aika would die. So no matter how much it has pained him for the last 15-16 years, he stayed away from his only living blood relative that tied him to his sister. Husband, talk to him, she worded softly once more. I can't, you know what would happen. I don't want to lose you. Sighing softly, the petite black-haired woman looks up with sadness and yet understanding in her eyes. Moroku, he is family. You have raised our children to believe that family is everything. Do you really want to make yourself out to be a liar? That word, despite the truth behind it, causes the older man to walk away. His wife looking out after them as their children return from the academy, all three chattering about something. Aika is startled as the head of the teachers approaches. Imino-san, how can I help you? Takahashi-sama, I am sure you have heard of the tests that the Hyuga have recently done, right? Nodding her head, she smiles as she looks at the kindly scarred Chunin. Indeed I have. And please call me Aika. Well, Aika-sama. As the head teacher of the academy and as one of the ones whom decides where the genins go for training, The case of your children at the moment is special because their training has to be done differently for them to pass and manage control of their chakra easier until they are able to pass it on to their children. I see. I thought as much, normal practices won't work with them as much, will it? Afraid not. I am sure you have heard of Naruto. Namek is right. I have. Breathing a relief, he does not notice the fear and various other emotions flitting through the woman's eyes. Well, we would like your permission to have him come part-time to help your children work on control. Chapter 38. 3 days later, Naruto found himself alongside Sasuke heading towards the home of Councilman Takahashi. The older man had been incredibly vehement against Naruto helping his children out with control of their immense chakra. But yet from what he had understood via Tsunade, the man was stunned that Danzu had somehow agreed to it. This had confused him to no end because he knows for a damn fact that Danzu and his cronies had always been among his chief tormentors as a child. Even that damn councilman whose children he was being ordered to help, despite not contributing to that hell which was his childhood, did nothing to stop it. Yes, Naruto fully remembers Moroku Takahashi. During those beatings he endured as a child, there had been times where the man was around and where he had hoped. He prayed as he had seen the anguish in the man's eyes that he would come and help him, save him from those who wished to kill him. But he never did. It was like Kakashi had said to a degree. Those who abandon others were worse than trash. Wanting to turn around, it took Sasuke's presence and usual HN sound to turn him back. Naruto gives the dark-haired youth a small smile. With Kakashi and Sai on a mission and Sakura helping out at the hospital, he was the one left to keep an eye on Sasuke. For despite the presence of Anbu, it was actually preferred that one of the members of Team 7 be within constant sight of the Uchiha. For they were pretty much the only ones if he got out of head that could stop him. So now approaching the home, they see two twin boys and a young girl waiting for them with curious expressions. All with dark hair, it is Sasuke who has a puzzled expression as Naruto introduces himself to them. Of the three, the girl, the one whom they call Kushina, has a weird resemblance to his blonde friend. It was not her general looks, but she did have the same bright blue eyes that he did. The exact same, and the way some of her mannerisms were virtually identical. Now keeping in mind that Sasuke was rated a genius for which the council knew. Despite his desire to really honestly welcome his nephew inside his home, Moroku prayed that the Uchiha did not see how much his daughter resembled Naruto in certain things. The image of his father, in most it was Naruto's eyes that he had gotten from his mother. Same exact eyes that his daughter possesses, but as the dark-haired youth's eyes keep flitting back and forth between them, he realizes that his hoping that it would not be noticed was all for naught. Already he could tell that the Uchiha's mind was working steadily with open curiosity. Please don't say anything. Moroku found himself chanting over and over as he prayed to whatever gods there are for the Uchiha to remain silent. The older man terrified, for now if this should come up would raise questions. And bring a blonde, that now despite it being only through his children, that he has a chance to know. The nephew that is the only living tie to his sister. The Uchiha had caught his eye and he looked through the window and the almost pleading gaze in them. Somehow Sasuke understands and at the moment remains quiet. But in response, the Uchiha promised questions for later. In the meantime, he listened as children introduced themselves to the one whom is his real brother in all but blood. Starting with one of the twins. Namek is sensei. I am Daichi and this is my brother Shinji and sister Kushina. Haruka sensei said you would do your best to help us with chakra control. He don't know how much help I would be, guys. But I will certainly do my best. The blonde youth grins. I hope you guys don't mind Sasuke here. Boo. And the fact that all three children had no idea whom he was, Sasuke had found himself liking the trio. Albeit wary and alert for any shift, the one Sasuke-only fan club had grown to include the Naruto one as well. The Konohamaru Corps has actually been helpful in their deterrent lately of the fangirls. Providing distractions and subtle obstacles for the girls to overcome. In fact, even Ibisu was impressed that he had come up with idea to make it a mission assignment for the various new genin teams. It worked. The new ninjas from the academy had a healthy new respect for the skills of two who had to avoid them daily. There were even those in the teams who were their fangirls, quit being so after realizing what the two had to go through every day that they were spotted. So the fact that these three had no idea gave Naruto and Sasuke hope for a day where they are not running from crazed fans. Watching as the dope explained about his presence and the help he would be able to give as well. The trio accepted him without question, as Naruto admitted that although he was helping them, finding the right words to say was not his strongest point. Sasuke was there not only for Naruto to keep half an eye on, but to help him explain what the blonde had to go through to better control of his immense chakra. Therefore he goes to reflect upon something else. Suspicious to say the least, he mused on the little girl. He observes her quizzing Naruto of the proper seals for Kage Bunshin. Their eyes were identical. The color, the shape, everything. The quiet realization of what this could mean as a familiar smile graces the child's lips as well as one of her brothers as Naruto struggles to answer a question. He realizes what this means. Sakura tests that Naruto had suggested had found something out alright. Something that he will indeed may or may not come to regret. These 3 children were not just students, they were his family. Chapter 39. A week later, while Naruto worked with the Takahashi children along with Sakura that day, Sasuke studied their mannerisms along with Kakashi, whom was puzzled at his odd request. Their every motion and found his conclusion further reaffirmed. That these children were his family. The little girl especially had an almost exact same attitude that his spirit brother had, and now he wanted answers. Naruto had told him of the reluctance that he had about doing this as memories of their father and his lack of action did not sit too well with him. Now waiting as with the recent revelation of his father, being the 4th, he wonders now. It was confirmed that Minato Namikaze had been an orphan, whom his mother was. For his instinct speaks to him that in the case of his friend. That it is now to Kushina's past that they must be investigating. Kakashi-sensei, you were once a student of the 4th's, right? Confusion crossing the copy ninja's features that even Sasuke can't see, the older man closes his book. You already know that I was. Tell me, what do you know of Naruto's mother? Kushina. Humor me, Kakashi-sensei. The serious tone was definitely in place now as the dark-haired youth looked up at his childhood teacher. And knowing the Uchiha for as long as he had, the older man begins to speak with a quiet, almost fond memory of the once vibrant woman. She was much like Naruto in personality but was calmer at times. He does get his humor and need to prank after all from his father. The older man chuckles in memory. Bright vibrant always happy, Naruto may look like his father, but his mannerisms, those are all her. What did she look like? Red hair, blue eyes. Before he could go any further, Sasuke makes the usual sound and beckons him to come closer. Admittedly wondering what he was talking about, he looks to where Sasuke points towards Naruto, who was currently helping the little girl with seals for a jutsu. The little girl listening intently and close to the blonde youth, Kakashi pales as another memory hits him. One of an older couple in the same position, a memory of a time when a red-headed woman approached a blonde about helping her finish a family jutsu from the whirlpool country that she knew. So do you see what I see now? Sasuke stated quietly. Despite hearing Sasuke's words, Kakashi ignores him for a moment. Ranting at this moment in his mind as goes on about his sheer blindness at certain things. Memories that now flow into his mind, faster and with a crystal clear clarity. I have forgotten about that bastard, the calm copy ninja states with a quiet fury. Kushina would have been upset that he did this to her son. Kakashi-sensei. Do not mention one word of this to Naruto, Sasuke. This could stir up a lot of issues that could make Naruto feel a lot of things that can and will set the bloodlust of the Kyuubi off. I must speak with Tsunade. Making a low sound, Sai momentarily appears minutes later as Kakashi takes off. Too much alike, Sasuke says nothing as he stares at one whom still despite their efforts, feels like a replacement in Team 7, a replacement of himself. In the meantime, as the two just remain silent and send what could only be certain fakeness towards one another. Kakashi had landed in a whirlwind at the office of the Hokage. The blonde woman is about to pound him into oblivion for waking her up, she is startled as he speaks. Listening to his words, she remains steadfast and practical. Unlike the copy ninja, whose chakra is now barely controlled in his own rage. Are you sure about this, Kakashi? Yes. I have forgotten about him, for I only met him that once. But looking at his daughter, she is a dead ringer for Naruto's mother. I see, to be sure, I will have Sakura go to the academy and order tests. The 2 boys, according to Iruka, are on the verge of leaving the academy for genin teams should they pass their exams. On some kind of pretext I will have all the classes' blood drawn. I want to be damn sure that they are indeed related. Chapter 40. 1 week later, Sakura came to the Hokage offices with a slow and steady gait. The tests in her hands were of 3 individuals. One of her teammate Naruto and the others was of 2 boys of this year's class. Identical twins, to be precise, she had at first been confused at this order. But now, after having done so and told to compare it with her friends, she was not blind to what it shown. That these boys and Naruto were related, the blood had similar and identical enough markers to prove that they were at least direct cousins to one another. Entering the offices of her sensei and teacher Tsunade, she handed them to the woman who looked at her. Well, see for yourself, Tsunade-sama. The pink-haired girl replied softly. I did it twice to be sure, but they are related. Need I tell you to not mention a word of this to Naruto? Shaking her head, the young medic ninja leaves as the order is given loud and clear. To find that he had family that was still leaving after all this time would destroy her friend and favorite knucklehead. Never realizing though that as she closes the door, the 2 men that emerge from the shadows. One her former teacher, the other a lost teammate recently returned. There you have it. Tsunade replied. Daisuke and Shinji Takahashi are indeed related to Naruto Namikaze. And as we know that Minato, his father, was an orphan for fact, it leaves belief that, as Kakashi-sensei has stated, that Councilman Takahashi is in reality. Councilman Uzumaki, Sasuke replied quietly. He being the one to originally notice the uncanny resemblance and stance that the children had to his childhood friend. He other than Sakura were the only ones of Naruto's age group to know this secret. So my question is, why did he not take in his own nephew? Silence between the three people reigned. Tsunade tapping her fingers in agitation at what has not become an even bigger problem. This young man whom she cared for like her lost brother, even almost like a son, needed her strength and her wisdom now more than ever. Kakashi and Sasuke both wisely remain silent as the blonde woman looks thoughtful. Her eyes seemingly contemplating things in her head, a frown appears on her face several times before something akin to a light shines in her eyes. I think I know what is going on. For that I think I am going to need Sai to give me some insight. Confused for a moment, the two are about to protest the involvement when it dawns upon Kakashi. The older man halting the younger, whose anger was clearly evident in dark eyes that flash red. Danzu? Yes. When you came to me last week, something about what you had said made me look into the backgrounds with aid from Yamato. Eika Takahashi was once a shinobi of the leaf, and Anbu as well to be precise, the older woman smiled. But not of the main branch according to records. So you believe that Naruto's abandonment was forcefully traded somehow for her release from the root? We all know, Danzu doesn't like to let go of what he thinks is his. At that moment Sai had arrived. The ink ninja looking at the others with a puzzled expression, his gesture to sit down as the door closes behind him. Elsewhere in the heavens, Kushina was ranting about her brother and everything going on down below. The death god and Minato just listening dumbly look at one another for a moment as she continues. Despite belief that once you die, you are able to watch those whom you love. That is not quite true, you have a semblance of feelings and the ability to see thoughts should they wonder about you. And Kushina was often drawn to memories of her brother. But all the times she could see, she had often wondered where was her little boy? Where was her baby? Now she knew, and like Kakashi had stated, she was extremely ticked off. The death god about to silence her for a moment found him puzzled as the newest angel of sorts stopped him. God or not? You do not want to get close. Minato said solemnly as he pointed to Jiraiya. The spirit of the Sannin, still twitching with the beating he had endured when he had tried to feel up his former student's wife. Normally a white man, well needless to say that his spirits walked towards the god to be Jujed found him to be all shades of black and blue. The death god nodded his head simply and went back to observing. The ranting continuing louder as curses and all sorts of threats permeated the air. What if Kakashi regrets not training Naruto? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.